Mishmin Tuhis, Conrakat Canyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers Roots. I come from Indian Canyon Nation, and I identify as Mutsun Ohlone, California Indigenous Two-Spirit, and I want to offer a land acknowledgement. By honoring truth in history, it is so very important that we consider how we are honoring the past to shape the future. We are all deeply impacted by Western settler colonialism, and these behaviors have been problematic in our education systems and going forward in our decision-making. If we do not know the history of the land that we are on, how are we coming to the most informed decision that is inclusive and accountable? How are we being good ancestors in training? One step is by acknowledging Indigenous protocol. Indigenous protocol is by acknowledging the first names of these lands, by identifying the first languages of these territories and the histories of the first peoples. If we were gathered in person, we would be gathering in Rumsen Ohlone territory. Monterey Bay is home to many Rumsen and Esalen and Selenian community members. There are many tribal bands and groups that call this place home. So I encourage you to take steps to honor truth and history and become familiar with these amazing narratives and communities. My mother, tribal chairwoman Anne Marie Sayers, and her mother, Elena Sayers, have always taught me that when song, ceremony, and dancing stops, so does the earth. I too believe that. So I would like to offer a song and to acknowledge that if we were gathered in Rumsen Ohlone territory, I will offer a Rumsen song that the Humaya dancers of the Coast Snow and Carmel Rumsen band sing. In my language, Humunya is hummingbird. And in the Rumsen language, in the dialect, Humaya. And I will use my regalia as an instrument. My regalia is my medicine. And Native peoples, we don't wear costumes. So this is a little hummingbird song, part of our creation story. And hummingbird, the animals and the plants, they are the first people. Before humans, they were here first. Humaya, 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 weha, weha. Humaya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humaya, 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 weha, weha. Humaya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humaya, 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 weha, weha. Humaya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humaya, 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 weha, weha. Humaya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humaya, 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 weha, weha. Humaya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Oh, oh, oh. No son. In breath, so it is in spirit. Welcome to what we now contemporarily call Ohlone territory. And thank you for honoring truth in history.
Thank you, Canyon, for helping us honor your ancestors, the first people, and the first stewards of the Monterey Bay region. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Roberts, and I am beaming to you today from downtown Santa Cruz in the Cruz IO building, which is on the ancestral lands of the Amamutsun people. I hope you'll take a minute and check out the map we posted in the chat to learn more about the history of the land where you are. Thinking about those who have come before us, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge those we've lost due to this terrible pandemic. I think it's important to ground the work we do and the conversations we have today in the reality of what our residents have dealt with this past year and continue to deal with on a daily basis. Many of us here today have what I call the privilege of mobility, to be able to move jobs, move homes, change careers, or even retire. But many of our neighbors are not so fortunate. They struggle every month to make ends meet, go to bed hungry, and have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So let's just pause for a moment to be grateful for what we have and to honor those who are not with us today. So sadly, we are still in Zoom land. I wish I could see you all in 3D, but we were really hoping to be back in person. But unfortunately, right when we had to make our go, no-go decision for this event was when Delta variant was raging. And we just didn't feel like it would possibly be safe to get everyone in a room together. So here we are, but I know we're all getting to be pros at this Zoom thing. So, but having said that, I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in person someday soon. Speaking of getting together in person, I'd be remiss if I didn't get a plug in for the California Economic Summit that is happening just around the corner, November 8th, 9th, and 10th. For the first time, the California Economic Summit is coming to our region. So I hope you all will plan on joining in the fun, live and in person in just over a week at the Monterey Conference Center. MBEP is honored to be the local host, and we have lots of amazing people and content from our region that will be highlighted at the summit, including the 4 tours that you see here. If you haven't already registered, you can find the link to register in the chat. So let me thank our sponsors who make this event possible each year. We're so grateful to all of you. A special shout out to our platinum sponsors, Owl Family Properties and NDC, who is celebrating their 50-year anniversary this year. And to our wonderful board of directors who have provided steadfast support and leadership during this most difficult year. And of course, our amazing staff, woohoo, Team MBEP, whose passion and good work inspire me every day. And of course, our members, all of you, you all make what we do happen. We can't do our work without you. So grateful for all your support. So just a few notes on the state of our region. When we look at the broader economic data, there is some good news. There's one example of the amount of new business starts are at record highs right now. I think a lot of that is people rethink what they want to do coming out of the pandemic. But a bit of bad news, of course, is that our Golden State and the state of Nevada tied in September for the nation's highest unemployment rate of 7.5%. Locally, we're doing a bit better. San Benito County is at 6%, Monterey County at 5.7%, and Santa Cruz County is at 5.4%. And as we all know too well, a big part of the unemployment issue for us is the disruption of our tourism industry that COVID has wrought. And the pandemic has created even a tighter housing market, making one of our most basic needs even more expensive during these tough times. These are just a few examples of data we track for our region. You can find all of this and other great data on MBEP's website under Data Insights tab. All this is to say that the work MBEP does day in and day out is more important than ever. So I wanted to just take a minute to share some of the highlights of our work. In housing, I'm really excited that our Monterey Bay Housing Trust that we started in 2017 with a $1.4 million investment has been leveraged to over $24 million to support local affordable housing projects in partnership with Housing Trust Silicon Valley. That's an amazing amount of leverage. Our farm worker housing work that we've done, led by Rafa Hernandez on our team, has done amazing work to make sure that we have more beds and more options to farm our important farm worker that contribute so much to our economy and our communities. We've advocated for 17 project campaigns, which has resulted in over 2,400 new units that are serving residents of all incomes. And we have established a network of over 500 housing advocates from all sectors that are ready to engage in local housing advocacy, which is so, so important. And in regards to education, we've created what we call a Housing 101 and now a Housing 201 education seminars and presentations that are available both in English and in Spanish. And we've shared these presentations with dozens of stakeholders to get them engaged in what they can do to resolve our housing crisis. In broadband, we were a part of a team that helped establish a standard, a higher standard than the state has set, of a regional broadband standard of 100 megabits down and 20 up. much more robust than what the state has determined we need, and we know we need more. So this is really important. We've also helped engage folks to get a clear idea of the maps of the coverage of both access and adoption, which, as many of you know, are two very separate issues in regards to broadband. And we launched something called Equal Access Monterey Bay, which is a fund housed at Community Foundation of Monterey County, which is enabling gap funding to be provided so that lower income neighborhoods can get the broadband access that they don't currently have. And one specific example is that we're just secured the funding for San Gerardo Co-op, which is on the outskirts of Salinas, and is now going to be able to have high-speed broadband. Woohoo! And of course, we're working very closely with the state to understand how we can get funds from the various state funding legislation that's been recently passed into our region to implement projects here. When it comes to workforce, we've had tremendous success with our Monterey Bay Internships Portal, which is a free way for students to learn about work-based learning opportunities with our local employers. We've expanded our Student Ambassador Program and now have supported 29 students with work-based learning opportunities in partnership with our members and supporting our members in various projects. And as you'll hear in a little bit in our program, we brought Degrees When Due to our region and helped identify 15,000 students in our region that are close to getting a degree, but that don't have one. And getting a degree, as we will hear, is a real step in getting higher income and in being a real engine to our economy. And with our fabulous Monterey Bay Career Connect website, we have tons of free resources for students, job seekers, and others that are really interested in learning about what careers are available, what financial support is available to get an education, what training opportunities, where jobs are growing, all sorts of great information. And we recently added this past year a hospitality to health page, so you can find out information about hospitality workers that may have been displaced during the pandemic and to get into health careers. And even more recently than that, we added a forestry careers pathway, which is really exciting and leveraging a lot of the expertise we have here in this region on drones. When it comes to climate change, we've done a lot of virtual workshops engaging various sectors of our community, whether it be academia, industry, or government. We have engaged our student ambassadors specifically on climate change projects that our members have had, and they've been working on various research and other projects to support that work. We've aggregated the various funding sources, whether it be federal or state or local funding, so people know where they can go to get climate change projects and programs funded. And we've advocated for over 20 projects, programs, and grant applications to make sure that that funding comes through and to make sure these projects carry on. So I just wanted to take a brief minute to highlight another really exciting project that MBEP just did these past few weeks called Uplift Central Coast, which is part of the Build Back Better Regional Challenge that the U.S. Economic Development Administration, the EDA, put forth. So they offered up the ability, what they call a NOFO, a Notice for Funding Opportunity, for people to submit applications. They needed to be clusters around an specific industry cluster. So we decided to team up with our friends just south of us in San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties, so that this entire effort spans a 6-county, as you'll see in the next slide, 6 counties from across the state that encompasses over 100 space and aeronautics businesses that exist in that geography, 48 airfields and airports, 8 military bases, over 15 educational institutions, and these 13 coalition members came together to put forth this grant application, which was really quite phenomenal that we did this work in like 3 weeks to come up with 8 projects that you'll see on the next slide that met a very prescriptive outline that the EDA had provided that we needed to adhere to in order to be worthy of the grant. So these are the 8 projects, 3 of which are in our region. The others are in the other parts of the Central Coast that I mentioned. Very exciting opportunity to potentially get $100 million invested in this part of the state, focused around aeronautics and space. That would be a huge economic boon for job creation for businesses to thrive. Just an amazing opportunity that is really upon us to take advantage of. So fingers crossed, we threw our hat in the ring in very short order with a very robust and compelling argument. I heard just this morning that the EDA received 529 applications from across the country. So competition is very stiff. We will be competing with those others to get into the first round. The EDA will determine who makes it into the first phase, the first round in December. They will only be picking 50 or 60 out of those 529. And then those 50 or 60 will be given a $500,000 grant in order to build out the big grant, which would then be due in March. And if we were to get that grant, we could get up to $100 million. So a super exciting opportunity. We are so grateful for all the partners that came together to put this together in extremely short order. And we think we have a really good chance of potentially getting this funding into our region. So moving on, there's so much I could go on to talk about what MBEP's been up to, but I'm going to stop there and we are going to get on with our show. So coming up today, we have some amazing, innovative folks. You're going to hear from JoBen Bevert, who is the founder of Joby Aviation, whose flying taxis are revolutionizing how we move about the world. And you're going to hear from the founder of Boxable, and how a house can be built in literally an hour because it unfolds. And they've also solved the transportation conundrum about modular housing. So as you can see here in this photo, it's actually towed behind a truck that fits on the highway. So tons of really good stuff. Childcare, we're going to hear about update from Regents Rice Salinas. We're going to hear from our wonderful elected officials on state and federal funding and a lot more. So buckle up. We've got a big program ahead and we can't wait to share it with you. So to kick things off, I'm going to introduce Paul Farmer, who is the CEO of the Salinas Valley Chamber of Commerce. And I asked Paul to be really heading up and moderating this panel because he wrote an article a few months ago about childcare and the business community. And it really resonated with me. We really need to figure out a way to have industry and have employers be at the table and figure out how we're going to solve this conundrum that is childcare. So I'm really pleased that Paul is able to be here with us today and for taking the time. So I'm going to hand it over to Paul now and let him introduce the rest of our esteemed panel. Paul, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. If the host could restart my video, please. There we go. Here I am. Good morning to everybody. Nice to convene with you in the metaverse. Again, Paul Farmer, CEO of the Salinas Valley Chamber of Commerce. Our panelists today for this discussion on childcare are Francine Rod, the Executive Director of First Five Monterey County, Andy Stone, the Director of Santa Cruz County Workforce Development Board, and the wonderful Miss Sonia Kohler, Director of Bright Beginnings Early Childhood Development Initiative. So before we launch into some questions with them, I'd just like to share how I came about to be here, why Kate asked me to do this. And that is a number of months ago, I was discussing with a number of other folks in the Monterey County Business Alliance, which is basically all of the chambers of commerce in Monterey County and the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Hospitality Association. And we were talking about the difficulty of hiring employees at this time. And we were discussing what some of those factors were and what we might be able to do about it. And the issue of childcare, of course, came up. With the challenges of the pandemic and children being homeschooled and things like that, a lot of parents did not have options for people to take care of their children. So they might not be able to return to work even if they wanted to. So that's where our conversation started. We realized that childcare really is a business issue. And whether you have children or not, you're affected directly or indirectly by this issue. So then we started talking about possible solutions, and we're going to get into that this morning with our guest panelists. We'll talk about what some of the challenges are with childcare, what some of the solutions are, and we're going to end our brief time with you today with some specific things that each of us can do to help support families and support childcare within our region. So that's the agenda for this morning. And I'm going to ask a few questions of our esteemed panel. And the first question is going to be just kind of setting the table with childcare issues. And that is, I'm going to ask Sonia to talk about what are some of the top challenges with childcare and how have those changed over time?
Thank you, Paul. And I want to start with a number that was in the New York Times recently. And we're starting off with graphs. I'm going to be doing a lot of numbers. So how other nations pay for childcare in the US, and here we're an outlier. So the chart over there shows you how much countries invest in childcare per person. We happen to be at the bottom at 500. The average is 14,000. At the top, it's close to 30,000. So really, that tells us a lot about the state of the childcare system. So our meta challenges are that it is underfunded and frankly, until COVID, under-recognized. To quote our Secretary of the Treasury, we have a market failure on our hands. So how do we feel that in our daily lives? Well, there's a shortage of childcare. Business can't find workers because of it. Childcare centers have to close classrooms because they can't find teachers. Parents have to choose between work and childcare because they can't find or afford it. And children aren't getting the socialization and the developmental supports they need to thrive in life, in school, as our future workforce, especially in light of the pandemic. The numbers you see on this next slide, thank you. The numbers you see here, rounded to make it easier on us, help explain that market failure. Why? With the current funding mechanism, it is impossible to build the childcare infrastructure we need for our economy to recover and grow. It's a good thing I like the impossible. So these numbers are from Monterey County, but the story is similar in Santa Cruz and San Benito. So to address challenge number one, the childcare shortage. We have about 90,000 young kids, a good portion that need childcare at some point in the day, but we only have 10,000 licensed spaces. Those are homes and centers. Clearly, that's not enough. If those 10,000 spaces were in full operation, we'd have a workforce of about 1,600. Here comes challenge number two, the teacher shortage. Just like in the TK through 12 system, burnout is sky high right now. So classrooms are shuttered. There aren't enough teachers. Low wages don't help, at an average of $14 an hour. So yes, it is very hard to recruit and retain qualified staff, even in the best of times. So without a competitive wage, it purely is a labor of love falling on the shoulders of women, and following an historical pattern of low-wage jobs falling mostly on the shoulders of women of color. So here's challenge number three, the affordability of childcare. The average annual cost of childcare is $10,000 a year. Some families receive state subsidies, but there are not enough subsidies to go around for low-income folks, let alone middle income. That price tag is just way too much for most families. The Department of Health and Human Services cites that childcare is affordable when it's 7% or less of household income. For the median income here, that means about $4,000 a year, not $10,000. Can you see how the math doesn't add up? That's why it's a market failure. You asked what's changed with COVID, Paul. It's made an already untenable situation worse. But there is good news, because now we all know about it, and that means we can do something about it.
Great. Thank you for that, Sonia. I love how you make something complex seem relatively digestible. So thank you for that. I'm also happy to see all the activity in the chat box. So the next question is for Francine, and that is, what is it that we think that families need right now?
Okay, great. Thank you, Paul. And I do love the title of this session today because it is really clear that childcare is everyone's business. We've already heard that whether we have kids or we don't have kids, that we're all affected by this market failure. And so it's really important that we think about ways that we can maximize and improve it, right? So one of the quotes that the Treasury Secretary has said is, it's past time that we treat childcare as what it should be, right? An element whose contribution to the economic growth is as essential as infrastructure or energy. All of those great programs that we're talking about later today, the innovative ones and the ones that Kate mentioned as part of the Uplift Vision projects, won't work if there's not childcare for the workers. And we know that the hospitality and other industries are really suffering in terms of having workers, and folks who are clients are having a hard time in restaurants and hotels because there's not enough employees. So what families need right now is safe, quality, and affordable childcare at hours that meet their work schedules and in developmentally appropriate ways for their children. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those, because obviously quality for a child is play, right? So play-based, and play is the way that young children learn. So that will really help them to have their creative minds that we need to be able to work in these industries that we're talking about today. That 90% of the brain grows before the age of 5. And so what happens in those years shapes their tomorrows. In terms of affordable, you already heard Sonia talk a little bit about that, and it costs more than tuition at CSUMB, which is $7,000. So that's an interesting juxtaposition there, to think that you're paying more for childcare than you are for tuition at a four-year institution. So given everything going on, as well with COVID, we know that parents actually need for all of us to take a little bit of a collective deep breath, because it is challenging out there and everywhere. We're seeing that there's a lot of empathy and patience that's needed. And a little bit later, we might be able to talk a bit about the mental health needs and the mental health supports that are needed out there right now because of COVID. I know that parents are having challenges because they may have their child in the safest, most affordable childcare. And then what happens when someone in the class's kid gets exposed to COVID? They have to take them out and they're not able to go to childcare. And we can't create a system where there's childcare for people who've been exposed to COVID, because that would not be safe for anyone. So we need to also put out there that we all need to be a bit more patient and empathetic with each other as we still deal with these challenges. Hourly workers also who still need to take time off for these different situations need financial support to help pay their bills. And then of course, there's a need for some navigation support because our systems are so complex to be able to get through the various aspects. So we have some solutions to some of these problems and some of these needs that we'll be able to get into a little bit later, but that's kind of painting the picture about what families need right now.
Great, thank you for that, Francine. I'd like to recognize a few comments that are going on in the chat box. Kathy Bell posted a link to some resources. Selena Nevares shared some numbers on the cost of full-time childcare in Santa Cruz. Can cost as much as $1,850 a month as a minimum, being like a second rent for many families. And Rafael Hernandez also said, like, it's important that we don't need a crisis like the pandemic for us to realize the importance of childcare. And I agree with you, Rafael, but you know, there's the silver lining to all this stuff we've been going through, as Sonia said. Now that it has more visibility, hopefully we can talk more about solutions. So happy to see all of that, and put your questions in the Q&A. We will have time at the end to answer some of your questions. So the next question for the panel is for Andy with the Workforce Development Board. And I'd like to ask you, Andy, what is the true cost of not having adequate childcare?
This is such a loaded question, but such a great one. So Even though we're looking right now at a 5.4% unemployment rate in Santa Cruz County, as was mentioned before, we're nowhere near where we were before the pandemic. And we're seeing 11,000 fewer people working than we had prior to the pandemic as well. That's practically 10% of our workforce that is sitting on the sidelines somewhere, either looking or not looking for work. So while we don't know exactly why people, and I'm embarrassed to say this, we don't know exactly why people are not returning to work in droves like we had expected, but often cited reason from job seekers is that the lack of childcare is keeping them from going into a sustainable long-term job. And that crosses industries, that crosses skill levels, that even crosses geographies. This is not just a coastal problem that we're facing here. So we'll start with, the cost to business of there being a lack of affordable, high quality childcare. So what you're going to see is that worker productivity is going to be way down when workers don't have access to that childcare. And to the point that their productivity is going to be down, they're also going to have to turn down shifts. So they're going to work reduced hours. They're going to have to turn down promotions and potentially even quit their jobs. So there's a study out of UC Berkeley Labor Center, which talks about the cost to business of this missed work and turnover that they're facing. And it adds up when you look at it. So it's over $1,100 per parent that is working per year is what it costs the business. And then if you look at, what the impact could be to their staffing if they did have access to childcare, it could reduce absenteeism for employers by 20 to 30%, and turnover could be reduced by 37 to 60%. So it's a massive impact on the ability of people just to come in or dedicate their time to work. And then as we look at, equity in this whole sphere, as Sonia mentioned earlier, that this is coming on the backs of women and particularly women of color, and they're often asked to sacrifice their careers to care for the children. And from that same study, you're looking at women with children under the age of 5 are participating in the workforce at a rate of 62.4%, compared to 75% of women of a similar age that don't have children under age 5. So, adding quality childcare could really help with some of these problems that businesses are facing right now. And then more broadly looking, so at all parents, so nationally, parents are losing wages because they're having to miss work, right? So we're looking at $8.3 billion in lost wages across the country for parents who have to take time off because they don't have childcare. And then also the last point is, on top of that, parents are having to forego returning to training, like to school or job training, which is going to help increase their earnings long run.
Great. Thank you for that information, Andy. So we're all clear on the challenge of childcare and what it means to us. Let's start to talk now about some of the solutions that we're working on locally. So we've got First Five here and Bright Beginnings, and we appreciate your recognition of the importance of this issue. And we know that you've been working on some solutions. So can you talk about what your organizations are doing now and what you think we need to focus on to support more innovative childcare solutions? So just jump in with your thoughts, if you would.
I'll go ahead and start because I'm so glad to be here talking about one of my favorite subjects, and I don't even have kids. So what do we do now? I'll start with that, and it's really simple. We need to address the market failure. So some of the things that we're doing to move in that direction. So Bright Beginnings helps by connecting dots between the various players and resources out there as we shepherd the county's strategic framework for supporting young children. As during COVID, as the core convener of the Early Childcare and Wellbeing Response and Recovery Coalition, we help childcare stay open by sorting through the shifting regulations, getting PPE and other technical supports out during shelter in place, and still now as things open up in this unsteady environment. Through all of this, and by we, I mean collectively, all the partners in the Bright Beginnings Initiative, we've built a stronger network of childcare champions. Partners include First Five, schools, the Office of Education, our chambers, MBEP, MAOF, United Way, county departments, community-based organizations, you name it. So we mobilized to garner 1.5 million in county ARPA funds to issue emergency stipends for teachers to hopefully keep them in the classroom, and childcare stipends for families. We're just starting on the nuts and bolts planning for the childcare infrastructure we need here in Monterey County, like doing the analysis and research to identify the true need here and the barriers to entry to find where we have leverage points to start more quickly. A center can cost $5, $6, $7 million to open. Someone has to raise that capital, renovate or build, train staff, the whole 9 yards. So it'll take time, and we can't do it alone. We're focusing on startups for licensed home-based care, which is a different model than the center-based care, much smaller and quicker to start up. So over the last year, we've been able to ensure that that childcare is embedded in our county's emergency response plan, in the SEDS, that's the strategic plan that influences access to federal economic development funds, and in the region's Rise Together investment plan that will be presented at the California Economic Summit. Really, it's exciting times for childcare, and it intersects with so many other areas like economic development, housing, health, gender and racial justice, you name it, childcare is there.
Great, thank you. Francine, what do you have going on over at First Five Monterey County?
So at First Five, we have been focusing quite a bit on the quality of the care and accessibility. So being one of the major players in this work, last year we supported over 22,000 children, families, and providers, not only in childcare, but in other sectors as well. And within the childcare realm, with the focus on quality and access for center, we've worked on with center-based, family childcare, family friend and neighbors, which are where the majority of our children are right now in terms of in care, is with family-friendly neighbors. With our partners like Quality Matters at MCOE, we were able to support more than 2,000 service providers and educators last year alone, and that includes the pre-K, infant, TK, and some kindergarten educators and family friends and neighbors. So I don't want to take up too much time going into all of the various efforts, but I will mention one that is supportive of a pathway, because one of the things that Sonia and we're talking about is the lack of providers. And we have been supporting Hartnell and MPC with counseling and other supports, and so has MCOE as well. So the number of graduates, EC graduates at Hartnell, is almost 7 times more than what it was before the program started. And that's due to coordinated efforts with MCOE and First Five, including stipends, technical assistance, counseling, books, supplies, and over 400 ECE students were supported with those services this past year. So getting children ready getting the providers ready to support the children also means building their mental health skills. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, and I saw some comments in the chat. Mental health is an area that has really risen in the spotlight because we have all reached our wits' end with this pandemic. And just imagine your 2-year-old who all of a sudden is being placed in a childcare setting with unfamiliar children and teachers. How do you think you're going to act? I know how I would react, and it wouldn't be pretty. And so we have been asking a lot of our children and a lot of their caregivers. And so at First Five, we've been helping the parents and the caregivers to recognize the trauma that we are all currently under, and how a child's actions and reactions are based upon the context. It's not that they're being bad. It's not bad behavior. Their behavior has meaning. And once you see that, your whole perspective changes. So we provide quality training and support and space for the childcare providers to know that they're not alone. So all of this has been great work, right? And but it just is not enough. We need more. And we have now, you heard from Sonia, we've got some plans, we've got the solutions. We need more facilities, more teachers, more supports for the childcare businesses, more supports for parents who aren't able to pay, more capacity building to ensure that the workforce is ready for the children. And all of us pulling together can really make this happen. So for that, we really need some more support from the government folks listening in terms of unused facilities, thinking about permits and processes and fees and zoning. This is a crisis that we all need to be leaning in on. And ARPA dollars at the local level can be actually used for childcare support as well. And philanthropy, I'm hoping that folks who are listening and participating will invest in the Regions Rising Together plan, because it has been something that's been well thought out with a lot of input from the both the community as the general community, as well as the childcare community as well.
Good. Thank you, Francine. Before we go into Q&A, and I see there's a few questions in the chat box. As Kate said, please put your questions in the Q&A now. We will have some time to get to those, but we want to share a few ending points here. Things that we really would like the audience to have in their mind as takeaways. What can we do? So one of the things we can do is invest in the childcare sections of the Regions Rise Together plan. There will be more information at that at MBEP's event, the California Economic Summit, on November 9th and 10th. Another thing you can do is just join the conversation about safe, affordable, quality childcare. You can follow First 5 Monterey County on social media, and there's Francine's contact info right there. Another thing that we can do, and I did this myself for the Salinas Valley Chamber, they made it shockingly easy. We like quick and easy to a solution that is really difficult and requires resources. But there's something easy that we can do. And I encourage you to go to MontereyCountyChildcare.org and look at what it takes to become a family-friendly business. All it is a checklist of different things. Are you doing this at your business or your nonprofit? Are you not? And you will see when you look at that list, there are many things that you can do that don't cost money, that are supportive of your workforce and make it a more amenable place for them when they have families. A lot of that is related to flexibility with schedules and things like that. So it's very easy. You go through, you check off the things that you're doing, you get some ideas of things like, well, I could add that. And it's a self-certification process. Once you do that, the staff will reply and say, congratulations, you're at this level. But it's just a really easy, friendly way to see what you can do to get started. Journey starts with all those little steps. Another thing is share resources on finding childcare. There are flyers and a button to add to your website at the MontereyCountyChildcare.org website. So we encourage you all to check that out. Again, we're all very busy, but I think you'll find the family-friendly business is a fantastic thing you can do that really doesn't take a lot of work. So check that out. And now let's go to a few questions from the audience. We're doing good with time. So the first question that I see here is about, we hear that Governor Newsom is proposing funding for a transitional kindergarten expansion. Why doesn't that solve our problem?
I'll take a quick stab at that first. And first of all, we are so thankful that Governor Newsom in the state of California is focusing and recognizing that childcare is a huge challenge for our communities to be able to get our economies going again, and to also be able to support our children to have the best support in life possible. And we know that even with the additional funding, it's not going to be enough. You saw the numbers that Sonia talked about in terms of needing 10,000 additional slots. It's not going to get us there. But we are happy for it, and we're looking forward to working to implement it. It also will come with specific kinds of strings attached to it, or certain specific things we need to do. And one of the areas of focus is on the UTK, or the universal preschool and transitional kindergarten. And so we still have infants and toddlers who need help, and we still have older children as well. So we want to continue, we want to make sure we're maximizing those dollars, and we know that we still need additional funding and support and coordination locally to make this work for our county.
Good. One of the questions in the Q&A box, Dan Swagan, thank you for putting it in the Q&A box. I'm trying to read the chat box as well, but put it in the Q&A. And Dan asks, what about the impact of the childcare tax credit? That's money that was there before the pandemic. Can one of the panelists talk about that?
I can take a stab.
I'll call on Sonia since none of
Yeah.
you.
So the child tax credit has been there, and folks get it. What's different right now during the pandemic is that families can get in advance. They don't have to wait until after they've filed. So that's really helpful to address things in the moment. It's great that it's there. I think the numbers are around up to $1,600 a year. Price tag 10,000. You saw in Santa Cruz, it goes up to 18,000. Similar here in Monterey County for childcare. These are all just small bits to that big market failure. So it's great that it exists, and it gives us something to build on and really fill the gaps that are still there.
Okay,
and
good. And I see Dan updated his comment that he said it was not, the funding was not there before the pandemic, from his understanding.
One thing that has existed is there's a I'm going to use the wrong term, a tax credit for independent care that folks can take. So technical terms, taxes, oh my gosh, not so good at that, especially in the morning. So that's existed before.
Okay, thank you, Dan, for your question. The next question comes from Carmen Gill, and that is, are there mental health strategies being connected to the work you're doing for children and families? Francine, do you want to take that one?
Sure, definitely. So we actually at First Five have a training program that anybody's invited to participate in if you support and work with children 0 to 5. And it's called the Infant, Family, Early Childhood Mental Health Training. And there's different segments depending upon where you work. So for childcare providers, they have their own strand. For doctors and nurses and mental health professionals, there is a cohort. And what we do is we help to support their growth and development in that area, because a lot of times there's not that focus when you're going to school for certain things in terms of mental health. We're hoping that's changing, because again, there's more dollars for mental health that's coming into the community too. But for right now, there aren't a lot of people who have specialized knowledge in early childhood mental health. There's also some other training that we do in the community related to Circle of Security, is another training that we provide in the community to folks who might be interested in learning more about how to really support families where they are, how to make sure we're listening to their issues and their needs and meeting them where they are. Facilitating attuned interactions is another mental health training and support strategy that we use in our county. So we definitely have various opportunities for training around mental health that's available, and we need more. So feel free to reach out to me to learn more about any of those, and especially if you want to help provide additional support for any of those.
Okay, great. Thank you, Francine. I'm going to bring Andy back for the next question, which is, why should the Workforce Development Board and the chambers, why should we care about childcare?
Well, absolutely. The point I talked about with, businesses needing employees is number one, but also there is a broken business model here with childcare right now that we're fighting against, right? With the low wages. And, we're forced as a workforce development board that's working with job seekers, making career decisions to say, how would you like to go back and go through some additional training to make $14 an hour? People will often just say, what's the next opportunity, right? So we've really looked at focusing on the childcare career pathway, right? We've developed opportunities in 12 different occupations in childcare that starts from the front line all the way up through elementary education, administration, and even some like policy and research positions. So we're looking at the whole life of the project and really promoting that to job seekers who may be interested in the field. And there's also entrepreneurial opportunities here as well.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we didn't get to touch on much, but it's a chance for someone to start their own business, even in their own home. So there are lots of opportunities out there.
Thank you, Andy. And I'll add my point to that. Some people were surprised to see the Chamber putting a cover article on our business journal about childcare. A quick plug, if you want to read it, you can go to salinaschamber.com, click on business journal, and you'll find it. The article was a couple months ago. But they thought, found it interesting that the Chamber, a business association, would highlight childcare. But really, it's about anything that's a barrier to our employers and our economy is something we need to work on. And I think we're recognizing these days that we need to have holistic solutions to problems and, not just a little silo. These things are all interrelated. And that's going to bring us to the last question, which is, other than wages, are there other barriers to entry for people who want to make a career working in childcare and early learning? And that may be a great segue back to Kate, if she wants to talk about that. So we're talking about other barriers to entry for people who want to make a career working in childcare and early learning. I will just end my part and say thank you to our panelists. Thank you for the great discussion. And Kate, why don't you take that last question and segue us on out?
Well, boy, I'm not really the expert to speak to childcare barriers, but I'm sure Sonia could answer it much better than I. But I think what you guys have all highlighted is the complexity of the problem, right? There's not just one silver bullet answer that's going to fix this problem. We all need to use the term we heard earlier, lean into this and figure out where in our own space we can make a difference and figure out how we solve this. I liked Rosa's, Vivian's comment in the Q&A about what's the model? Like, let's figure out, is there a good model out there that is a fair market childcare model with a sliding fee that, might provide a way for us to really grapple with this problem better? I know there's a ton of good work that's happening, but we really need to think more deeply about how we get into this and figure out what the solutions are. I will say that you're going to hear from Dr. Purnell here a little bit later for a quick sneak peek at our Regions Rise Together initiative that has been mentioned. And as was said, childcare takes a very prominent position in trying to figure out how we find funding to do this. And we can also ask our elected officials that will be with us later. As many of us have been following the massive bills going through the federal government right now, childcare kind of got the axe. I think there are some people that are quite upset about the monies that were removed from that. I haven't been following that as closely, but I think that was, where is government's role? Where is additional funding from Governor Newsom coming in addition to the TK? What is philanthropy's role? So there, we can all come together to figure this out. And I'm really so grateful that we have such great minds, you all, working on this problem, and so grateful for all you're doing. And Paul, again, really appreciate you stepping in and being the moderator here and representing the voice of business. I think employers need to get get the memo on that we need to be at the table and figuring this out together. So gratitude. Thank you all. Great. Okay. Wow. That was kind of mind-bending, all that good stuff and the complexity of the problem around childcare. So we're going to kick it over to a new topic now. And I'm going to introduce Dr. Susan Carpenter, who is a trained immunologist whose research focuses on how people can protect themselves against infection from bacteria and viruses. She will cover the science behind the COVID-19 variants, which have been obviously a top of mind of everybody, and figure out how we, deal with them in a way that as we continue to open up the society and get back to business. So with that brief intro, Susan, I'm going to hand it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today about COVID-19 and living with variants. The COVID-19 pandemic is caused by this virus called SARS-CoV-2. And what you can see here is a depiction of what this virus looks like with its characteristic spike proteins on the outer surface. And this is what the virus uses to gain entry into our bodies, and this is what our vaccines are targeting. So when we have neutralizing antibodies, we're trying to neutralize this area to stop the virus from getting into our bodies. And the genetic makeup of SARS-CoV-2 is that it has an RNA genome. And why this is important is because we know that RNA genomes are less stable than a DNA genome. And this is important because when we see that this virus has the ability to multiply and replicate within a community, having an RNA genome means that it's less stable. And so as it replicates, it can have errors. And if those errors are advantageous to the virus, what can happen is that then we can see a rise of variants. And here I'm showing you some of these so-called variants of concern, like alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. And the delta strain right now is the one that's dominant throughout the globe and the one that we're dealing with right now. And when we call these variants of concern, we often associate them with this so-called or not value. And what this or not value really means is it's the level of transmissibility or how contagious this particular strain of the virus is. So the original strain.
Susan, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're seeing your presenter view.
Oh.
And I wonder if maybe we could get
no
the
problem.
visuals
I'll swap
better.
here.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Better. Thank
Better.
you.
Excellent. Sorry about that.
Carry on.
As long as we're in Zoom, we're still getting this wrong. And so what we're seeing is these variants of concern. What happens is that they can become more contagious. And so the original strain was such that one person could infect up to 2 individuals. And now what we can see with these alpha strain that arose out of the UK is that one individual could infect between 4 and 5. And now the delta variant that we're dealing with right now, it means that one individual could infect between 5 and 8. And this concerns us because when we think of the most contagious viruses in the world, we think of mumps and particularly measles. Measles is one of the most infectious viruses where one individual can infect up to 18. And so that's why we really keep an eye on these variants because, the concern over them becoming more transmissible. And just in the last 2 weeks out of the UK, what we've seen is that there are additional variants arising, one that's been given the name Delta Plus for now, that appears to be about 10% more transmissible. So that's why we're really keen to keep looking at these variants. And so we're still very much in this pandemic. Here is just some sobering statistics to show you where, and this is from The Economist, it's already a little out of date, but the number of individuals who have died from COVID-19 throughout the world is now actually up closer to 5 million individuals. And this is believed to be a massive undercount. And the actual number is estimated to be over 15 million individuals throughout the world have died from COVID-19. Right now in the US, there is some optimism because COVID cases have been dropping. And what does this mean for Monterey and beyond? Well, you can see here from this graph, and actually there's really nice interactive portals, both within Monterey and Santa Cruz, that you can go into and take a look at all data related to COVID-19, from vaccinations, hospitalizations, deaths. Here, I'm just showing you from Monterey, from our most recent wave where you can see the cases, and it's broken down by age group. And what this is showing you is that it's trending downwards, which is great. But you can really see that a number of these cases are in children, so those aged between 0 and 18 years old. And so our children, especially those 12 and below, are one of the most at-risk groups right now because they have not been vaccinated. And hopefully that's going to change in the next couple of weeks. And so if we take a look at the case numbers within Monterey, what we're seeing is promising in that the last 14 days, there is a reduction in nearly 50% of cases over the last 14 days, and a reduction of about 44% in hospitalizations. However, one of the figures that concerns me and that I would like to see increase is the number that are fully vaccinated. And so right now that's standing at 60%. So vaccination is one of the key areas that we can use to protect our community. And here is data from the CDC that's showing you that if you're not vaccinated, you are over 6 times more likely to test positive for COVID-19. You're 10 times more likely to end up in hospital, and you are over 11 times more at risk of dying from COVID-19. And this graph is just showing you that while we can see the highest numbers are for those that are unvaccinated in relation to severity, we can see that actually all the vaccines are working very well in terms of decrease in severity as well as death from COVID-19. You may also have been hearing quite a bit over the last couple of weeks about this idea of waning immunity and what does this really mean. So what the data is showing us is that about 6 months out from the second dose of Pfizer vaccine, or in fact any of the vaccines, we see this reduction in neutralizing antibodies. And so what does this really mean? As an immunologist, this doesn't really surprise me, because this is what we often see, and this is why many of our vaccine regimens have up to 3 doses. So what we can see is that when you're given your first dose, you increase these numbers of your antibodies. So these are the antibodies that are going to target that spike protein. And then it goes back down. And that's because you get a few of these antibodies that are going to live for a very long time. And these are called memory cells. So that when you get the second dose, you're going to have this big boost in the number of antibodies that are produced. And again, over time, this is going to decrease. And so if you get a third boost, this is going to go up even more. And so the idea of the second and third doses are to get you higher concentrations or more of those antibodies. They're going to become more specific and they're going to have higher affinity, meaning they can bind even better to that spike protein and stop the virus from getting in. And our hope is that this will provide longer lasting antibody levels. And so booster shots have been recommended for those that are over 65 and in vulnerable groups, as well as those that have a lot of interaction with the public, so healthcare, food sector, educators. And the reason boosters have been recommended, especially to those in at-risk groups, are because we want to get those number of neutralizing antibodies up, especially for anyone with a weakened immune system. Because if you have a weakened immune system, you never had the same amount of those neutralizing antibodies as a healthy individual. Another reason for promoting boosters is it will limit those breakthrough infections that we see, because those higher amounts of those antibodies you have, the less likely you are to get infected with the virus. And data from Pfizer just in the last week shows how effective that booster dose is. So it's about 95% efficacy against getting infected with COVID-19. We also do have some real world evidence that the boosters are working. And this is from Israel, because in Israel, they only vaccinated the population with the Pfizer vaccine. And so they started a very aggressive booster campaign throughout the summer. And so we're just getting the first data from that now. And so you can see for one of the most at-risk groups, which are the individuals over 60, you can see that the unvaccinated group have the highest number of deaths, and that really dramatically drops when you have 2 doses and drops even more for the third dose. But it's also worth remembering that we are in a global pandemic, and this pandemic is affecting obviously everyone throughout the world. And here I'm just showing you data from Our World in Data. This is a wonderful resource for anyone who wants to go in and see what's happening throughout the world in relation to COVID-19 vaccines, hospitalizations and deaths. And this I'm just showing you data from throughout the world of who's been vaccinated. And you can immediately see that there's a huge problem, right? In that in Africa, there has been only about 2 to 4% of individuals had the opportunity to get vaccinated. So this is really critical. We need these vaccines to not only get throughout the US and in our local community, also throughout the world, because this is a global pandemic and these variants can arise anywhere throughout the world. And when they do, they impact us all. So it's really important that we get those all throughout the world. Here at UCSC, there is an active project called the Tree of Life Project, which is a development of a public health data platform. And this is really exciting project out of the Genomics Institute, whereby they are gathering all sequencing data, and they're sequencing themselves, but also gathering data from throughout the world to build this platform that you can go and take a look at if you would like to, where they're going to put in all those sequences. And what that's going to mean is that we can really easily track when variants are arising. We can see where in the world they're arising from and if they're going to become something that we should be concerned about. And some final remarks, the data that we're seeing so far suggests that SARS-CoV-2 is going to become endemic. What that means is it's not going away anytime soon. Our hope is that it will evolve to a point to be like other coronaviruses that just affect us like the common cold. But if we continue to see variants arising, what that will mean is it could mean that we will require updated vaccines on a yearly basis, something similar to what we do for flu. So how do we continue to protect ourselves and our community? Get vaccinated, because vaccines don't just protect you, they're going to protect those around you, and especially those around you who might not be able to get vaccinated. I suggest continuing to wear masks indoors. Masks are a very small but effective tool in our arsenal against this virus. If you have symptoms, please get tested. There's many free testing clinics all throughout the county, and if you just Google your county, and that will give you an interactive map of where you can get tested. And if you plan to gather indoors, especially as we're coming towards the holidays, I really suggest getting tested. Even simple laminar flow based tests, because if you get tested within 24 to 48 hours before an indoor event, it's incredibly unlikely then that anyone would be exposed. And this is true whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Susan. That was fascinating and a ton of data in a very short period of time. So really appreciate that. And we're all loving your accent, by the way. So maybe just, we only have time for, I think, just one quick question probably. And I think you touched on it briefly, but the long-term impacts of a long COVID, I just wonder if you could, wax poetic on that a little bit. And then if any particular variants that are really worrying you that you're seeing anywhere developing, that was something I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah, they're all great questions. And I would say that right now, Delta variant is dominant. It is still the most transmissible, such that a couple of variants have arisen that really did start to worry us, that looked like they could evade some immune responses. But because they're not as contagious as Delta, Delta seems to have overshadowed them. So in some ways, we hope that continues, and we hope that we don't see mutations that are evading the immune response. That's again where things like the Tree of Life project will help us to really track them and spot really quickly if there's a variant coming online that we're very worried about. Yes, the long COVID is a big concern, and this is one of the reasons why I really push for vaccination, because I've had many questions about, well, if COVID's not that bad, should I just get the natural infection and will that protect me more? And my answer is no, because there's just so much unknown about the virus, and long COVID is a real problem that we see between 30 to 70% of individuals that get infected with COVID-19 have some form of long symptoms. And that's worrying, right? And we're studying this virus in real time. And so we just don't know the long-term impacts of having COVID. And so therefore, the best way to protect yourself is to get vaccinated and not risk having any of those long-term symptoms that we see.
Right. And just a quick last question that somebody put in the Q&A, status of the cheap home tests. Any thoughts on that? Are they good? Should we have?
Yeah, that's a great question. And while they're not perfect, what I've seen from the data I've seen so far is that they're pretty effective at picking up symptomatic infections. So they're not so great at picking up the asymptomatic infections. Mm-hmm. But I think I use them all the time, especially with my kids going to daycare. If they're, have a little head cold, I'm worried because they're symptoms. So we will use those tests, because if you have head colds or symptoms or sore throat, that kit will tell you if you have COVID. It's just not so effective at the asymptomatic. So I think there is a real place for those at-home tests. And that's why I would even suggest using that if you're gathering indoors with family coming up to the holidays. It's just an extra tool to help limit. If you want a really sensitive test, then the PCR tests are the best.
Right. I know I picked up a couple just so I had them on hand in case we develop symptoms. And,
I wish they were cheaper. In fact, I wish they were free. I wish we all had them.
There's a good note to end on. Yes. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan. It was really interesting. I'm really happy you were able to join us today and share your expertise in this area. And I know our audience appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving right along. We are going to now introduce our next discussion, which, as I mentioned briefly in my opening remarks, is called Degrees When Due. So we have Leanne Davis and Kate Mahar here, who are part of the team that are helping bring this program to our region. They're going to give you a little bit of more background on the program and give you an update on what's going on here in the region. So with that, I'll kick it over to you guys.
Great, thank you, Kate, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here. We're really pleased to be able to join you today, though I do wish it were in person. My name is Leanne Davis, and I'm at the Institute for Higher Education Policy, and I'm joined by my colleague, Kate Mahar from Shasta College in California. Next. So I think we wanted to start with, there you go, thank you. Start with a little bit of framing to talk about what we're dealing with. According to some of our most recent National Student Clearinghouse data, there are more than 36 million Americans who are aged 25 and older who've earned some college credit, but no degree. We also know that roughly 10% of this population are what we call potential completers. So they've completed at least 2 years of academics credit, and they have that much academic progress to show before they left college. We also know that there are huge benefits to completing a college degree. In addition to the earnings boost, which could be roughly $30,000 annually, depending on where you're living and which degree you're earning, there are also studies that relate degree completion to improved life and health outcomes, to home ownership, to increased civic engagement, and other societal benefits. Unfortunately, we know that the students who stop out are more likely to be Black, Latinx, Indigenous, underrepresented AAPI students, and students who come from low-income backgrounds. We also know that they have other characteristics they share in common. They could be, a lot of them might be veterans, they might be parenting students. And if we really want to have a more equitable society and distribution of these benefits, we need to be able to target our degree attainment interventions for these groups of students. You know, another reason why this issue is important is this recognition of learning and work. So we know that students have invested time and energy into their school, and we want to recognize the learning that they've done in the classroom and even in the workforce that can be applied to their college credit. There are also a lot of enrollment declines during COVID that are alarming. So it's even more, this work is even more of an imperative now. So this is one of the reasons why Degrees When Due is such an exciting initiative. It's an equity-based completion initiative that's designed to increase degree attainment among the population of students with some college and no degree. Through Degrees When Due, we promote evidence-based degree reclamation strategies that help build the expertise and capacity on campuses that are committed to helping more of these students across the finish line. So through Degrees When Due, we provide the institutional practitioners with tools, technical assistance, and coaching, and how to use their own disaggregated student data to really understand who falls into their own population of students who have some college, no degree, and use that data to implement targeted strategies to help these students re-engage and complete their degrees. Next. I'd love to show you the scale and the scope of this initiative. So we're wrapping up our 3rd year of implementation. And over the last 3 years, we've worked with institutions from 23 different states and systems. We've had over 190 campuses participate, and 59 of those are minority serving institutions who are targeting strategies specifically to the groups of students they serve, whether those are at Hispanic serving institutions, at HBCUs, or even institutions that are serving a large number of Indigenous students. Next. But why we're here to talk today is about what we've been seeing in your Monterey Bay region. So with MBEP support and recognition of the importance of this work in finding and re-engaging adult students, helping them to finish their college degrees, which could really kind of lead to a more educated workforce, but could also lead to greater economic benefits for the region. With their help, we were able to work with 5 institutions in the Monterey region. What's particularly exciting for us is that this ecosystem includes community colleges, a Cal State, a UC. And so we span the 3 post-secondary systems, which if you know California post-secondary education, that's unique and excited to have all, we're excited to have all 3 working together. So we've been working with Cabrillo College, Cal State Monterey Bay, Hartnell, Monterey Peninsula College, and the UC Santa Cruz. Next. So according to recent census data, there are over 93,000 adults, age 25 or over in this, this service area that I know MBEP serves that have some college and no degree. So through our work with Degrees When Due with these institutions over the last year, those institutions have been able to identify over 7,500 students that are within reach of a credential. So this means these students are typically within 1 semester of finishing their college degree. Some of them might only have 1 course left to complete. So imagine for a moment the economic benefits for these adults, if they're able to complete their degree, but also the resulting economic benefits to the region if we have these, if we're able to have these adults back in the workforce, or contributing to society, or all of the other benefits that we see from completing a degree. So we're thrilled at IHUB to have this participation in what we're starting to see and learn from this region. And it's such a promising step toward increasing regional degree attainment. But now I'd love to turn it over to Kate, who is our wonderful coach for the state of California and has been working closely with these colleges. I'd love to have her share some of her insights and specifics.
Great, thank you, Leanne, and thank you so much for having us here. It's really powerful to talk about this work in light of what we've already heard this morning around childcare and around the pandemic, and it just emphasizes how important it is to get folks degrees when they've worked so hard and they're so close. And then, of course, the tie back to the economic impact, I think, really is what makes your region so unique. As a coach, I've gotten to work with about 30 institutions in both California and Colorado. And your region is truly exceptional. In many places, we had to talk about the importance of partnerships with your 4-year partners, or the importance of re-engaging adults. And that was not the case in this region. In fact, there was so much work already happening that we just got to be a part of it, be a partner with. The partnerships between the 2- and 4-year, the data sharing, some amazing work around data sharing to help folks get the associate's degrees that they were close to earning at the community college, tied into your high need economic areas. Those were things I just didn't see literally anywhere else. So it was just really an honor to work with the institutions in your region. Degrees When Due as a project is coming to the close of the first stage. And that first stage has allowed us to learn a lot about what's happening in California, and a lot of, how many folks are we actually talking about, and what can institutions do to make it different for these students. And now I'm so excited about the next stage where we actually can make that happen in California. Some of the things that we saw throughout the project, and of course in California in particular, was there were some common trends that were preventing folks from completion around unclear barriers or unclear timelines, or local things that could be changed at institution to make things easier for our students. The things that I saw just really excelling in the region were targeted re-engagement to adults, a deliberate effort to bring them back, collaboration with regional partners, retention teams to make sure folks stayed in the system in the first place, And then really tying in the importance of adult learners into strategic enrollment plans. So I have to say, I got more out of being a part of your region than I offered, but I just want to congratulate folks for the culture that really emphasizes partners and regional impact. And thank you for having us.
Great, thank you both. Such an exciting program and lots of opportunity there. So appreciate you bringing an update and sharing the good work you guys are doing. We have time for maybe just a couple questions. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A button there. I'd like to ask you a question. For our colleges here, what are some next steps? What's next on the horizon as far as leveraging this work?
Kate, do you want to take that first?
Sure. And again, I really want to emphasize the work that was already happening. It was Degrees in Do was a perfect companion project because folks had been thinking about this work anyway. So I imagine what we'll see moving forward is a continuation of the importance of partnerships. There's been some great pilots around data sharing where if a student started at, say, Cabrillo and didn't transfer but didn't complete their associate, partnering with CSUMB to share those credits back so that they can get that associate degree. And then just, I think there's been a lot of success on recognizing the importance of re-engaging adults to the enrollment plans, to completion, and to the economy. So I think that is just, will continue, if not accelerate. And literally thinking about this as a regional issue, is something that other regions can learn from. And I think that energy is only going to grow as well. But again, I can't say enough that it was the people in place that were doing the work before we even started talking about Degrees in Do that are going to continue to make it happen moving forward.
Yeah, I think can I just share that I think Degrees in Do is just in some ways, it's just a snapshot in time of this important work that's going on. And I think what we most, even though our research project is wrapping up, and this is helping us to learn so much more about this, who are these students all across the country? What types of barriers do they experience to completing their degrees? So what can we learn about whether there are any federal policy implications, or are there state, as we start to look at what we see within each state, are there state policy recommendations that we can make that will help accelerate these efforts? But we're thrilled that most of these institutions want to continue with this work, and that's the important thing, that we're helping to really build sustainable processes so that it's lasting change. It's not just a one and done thing.
Right, not just a flash in the pan. I love that. We had a really interesting comment by Kathy Bell in the chat about her ability she realized that her credits would expire, and her point is that a lot of people probably don't even know that. So this is exactly why the work that you're doing is so important. So you can reach out to those people, help them understand how they can complete and get them back on track to finishing their degree. Would you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we saw in Shasta College in particular was we were recreating the wheel a lot. So we were discovering these barriers on our own, and then you start talking to other institutions and you recognize some of those barriers are shared. So now we've learned from other folks of what to look for, of best practices of how to mitigate those challenges. And as a group and as a statewide community of practice has been working together, it's been really encouraging and motivating to learn from other folks to see what we can do at our own institutions and also statewide.
Yeah, I love the policy angle, because that you should package all that learning up into some new ways that we can make it that way for everyone. So, well, on that positive note, we are at time. I wanted to thank you both. It's been really lovely to work with you this past year. Haley Mears on my team was the first one to kind of find out about the great work you were doing in other parts of the state, and did a lot of heavy lifting to bring you guys here and really, as you say, leverage the good work that was already happening. So thank you both. Really appreciate you being here today, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we are on time and moving along. So I'm really excited that Dr. Carissa Purnell could be here with us today. This is a labor of love, this project called Regions Rise Together that she's going to talk to us about. She's going to hit on some themes that you've already heard about around childcare and others, but it's really all about figuring out how we create an inclusive economic development plan, an investment plan. And she's here to share a little bit about that. So Carissa, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. Thank you, Kate, for the intro. Before I jump into, I just wanted to extend thanks on behalf of myself, the children and families who call this Salinas Valley home, to Kate, her MBEP team, our collaborative partners from the James Irvine Foundation, California Forward, the Sankofa team, for just not only being supportive, but being conscious and critical about working towards truly authentic engagement and allowing us to lead from the streets and our neighborhoods to bring this work to life. And to honor the lineage and legacy of that work, before I jump into, I just wanted to acknowledge my background. This is the Sanborn Ranch House in Acosta Plaza, and I want to lift up Alfred Diaz Infante, his influence and his power, and bring him into this space. I wish more than I think he was here with us this morning to celebrate this moment moving forward, but I can say without hesitation that he is at our side in spirit each day and with each battle that lies ahead. He was part of this work I'm sharing with you here this morning, and he's always going to be part of it. So thank you. So moving forward, just kind of looking about the reality of our families in Salinas that we often hear so much about. You can see from this slide that really captures kind of the snapshots of the economic reality of the valley that struggle, particularly as an outcome of an unstable, inequitable economy has historically created a near impossible reality for so many of our families, and particularly those of color. Wages earned, as you can see here, don't allow access to things like the housing market and the system as it exists. The rising costs of childcare that you heard so much about this morning, you weave in things like rising cost of food and transportation. It just adds to this really heavy burden that our families are sort of struggling with every day. You toss in a pandemic, and it's only worsened the situation that we know has always been here for so long. So to tackle this, we need multiple sectors. We need systems, institutions, from businesses, philanthropy, to really sort of push back on the world that created and just make it better collaboratively for everyone who's in it. So looking at the framework and moving forward into the work itself on this next slide, you can see kind of how detailed and intricate the work has been, the long process and the timeline. We originally met back in, I think it was Valentine's Day, and it was not where I wanted to spend my Valentine's Day, but I suppose it was all right. We met the whole California Forward and MBEP crew and sort of talked about this idea of building the Regions Rise Together, looking at what was happening in Fresno through the Drive network, and really kind of create a unique and one-of-a-kind plan for the Salinas Valley. So we were excited, but I think for quite a few of us, we were a little bit hesitant, for all transparency purposes, that someone's going to come in with money to fix our problems. And so we struggled with the idea of having it be a top-down sort of model. So you can see that following our project launch, there was this major pivot that took place in October. So I think honoring the work of amazing agencies like COPA and CCA and Mujeres en Acción, we had a very powerful, deep understanding of what community engagement looked like. So we wanted to be the ones to lead it. So to acknowledge that this work took a major pivot, and thanking Sankofa and MBEP for the flexibility to allow us to step forward while they stepped back, I think was really important. So we did some community engagement work. This is the pivot pilot that we talk about so often. So there are core teams, there are stakeholders, there are agency sort of leads at the table, but it was really moved by residents, which I think is what makes this powerful and uniquely ours, I think, in the Salinas Valley. So at the center of it, we've got the core team, not the center of it, the community engagement working team at the middle of it. So that includes residents from across the county. So we did some really great sessions out in King City, Greenfield, and then here in Salinas as well. So it's really expansive to be inclusive of the whole valley. We've got the core team and investment working plans that we'll hear a little bit about right now, and then the extended team. So that's just sort of the framework. So if you move forward to the next slide, you can see how many people we brought to the table. I think initially There was a great framework. We had looked at what took place in the Fresno Drive Initiative, but we said we want to bring our whole family to the table. So that includes everybody who's on here. And I think if you take a look, you can see sectors from early education to higher learning to businesses to community organizations. And one of the things that has made this unique is that everyone has sort of found their voice in these really unique working groups, and everyone has sort of their teeth in the game. And the thing about that makes it powerful is we all hold each other accountable as well, right? So one person is not allowed to fall off because this work is all of ours as we do it together. So I think it's really great that this really captures the expanse of the work we're doing, but also the generational work that has been done before us, right? So this is not something that was created from scratch. We recognize things like the work from the Alisal Vibrancy Plan, the Sanborn Ranch House, the VHC Initiative. We understand that so much has been done before us, so we brought everyone to the table to lift up the work as we move forward. And then if you look onto this next slide, this is the theory of change. So the genius work of the Sankofa team, who've been really helpful in sort of allowing us to speak and gathering our thoughts together. This is the model that we used as we designed the work and the working groups, really focusing on our core values, which helped us identify our intervention and investment areas and sort of looking long-term sort of the outcomes. So I'm not going to get into great detail about each of those areas, but I really did want to point out the race equity piece. So one thing that we have learned, particularly in this valley over the years, is that race absolutely does play a role in how we navigate the world and how we've built the world, but also is going to play a foundational role in terms of how we co-construct it and rebuild it moving forward. So to be deliberate, to call it out is important for us because we think that that's sort of been a silenced, nuanced piece of the work for so long. So to allow that to be a driving force as well. And if you take a look at the core values, I think it's important that engagement and community is a piece of it, but also leveraging things like businesses and bringing in leadership and our elected officials, understanding that this is not just a grassroots residents movement. This is a cohesive, collaborative, beautifully dysfunctional family that we've created to allow this work to move forward. So I think on the next slide, we've got the investment areas that were identified. So these are important to us because these are our direct outcome of the community engagement sessions. So these were identified from a couple months of talking to residents about their struggles with childcare, talking to things about how debt has impacted them, particularly pre and post pandemic, and sort of what has exacerbated the situations that our families are in. So just wanted to call them out. We've got the Hubel Cabin Development Group, and I also wanted to acknowledge, I don't think Francine will let me live this one down without acknowledging the term human capital. We're working to sort of massage, be a little bit more inclusive and aware of naming that particular group. But that one is important for us because it's improving things like equitable and quality access to childcare and early learning that you heard about earlier, increasing educational and employment opportunities in sort of up and coming fields, whether it's ag tech, green jobs, health, aeronautics in particular is one that has come up for us, and expanding leadership development and the opportunities within that ecosystem to allow the residents who've engaged in the work, to allow the people we work with to step up into the positions and take over the work to let it live. The Economic Opportunity Expansion Group is the one that I had the privilege of being a part of. So the weekly meetings were really unique because we were able to have conversations, and it was interdisciplinary and cross-sectional. So we heard from folks in higher ed, in business and philanthropy, what it will look like to do things like expy high-end red jobs and build wealth. So this idea of not only creating opportunity, but creating one that is generational and systemic. And I don't want to say break the cycle because I think that that's sort of a strange term, but we're just rebuilding something better to give to our young people. And so this is to build wealth, to build opportunity, home ownership, employee ownership in the businesses that we're working for, to create something that is sustainable and not just an immediate crisis response. So while we're grateful for the cash interventions that have come, the financial stipends are really great, but long-term, what are we leaving to the young people after us, sort of moving forward financially? And then that last group, the Neighborhood Development and Infrastructure one, all of the great housing minds got together. So improving things, obviously, like access to affordable housing, the stability of it, the quality of it, And changing sort of the awareness about what that looks like is really important. And the infrastructure in which we build is important, making sure that each zip code is honored, each community is honored, and the neighborhoods are brought to the table in their own individual needs and assessment as we move forward. And this last slide here of the actual investment areas, I think, is really important because we were able to put numbers to it. So if we look at the actual sample investment slide, we were able to give some dollar signs to it. So there we go. For the first time, I think for a lot of us doing this work, we were asked how much money do we need? And so there's been this historic tradition to rely on us to capture community voice and then put it in this beautiful plan and bucket and then place that on a separate shelf from where folks keep the money. So now we're on the same shelf and we're sharing the money. So it was really beautiful to be able to draft an investment plan with some dollar amount. So the idea of expanding childcare, early learning career pathways and opportunities is a huge one. So we've allotted quite a few dollars to that in hopes that it can be something that we fund moving forward. Pathways and leadership development, looking at the work being done in COPA, CCSA, and BHC, it's so important that we not only tap in those leaders to capture their voice and perspective, but to build on that and build their own opportunity, whether it means going on to higher ed or whether it means stepping aside for them to take on roles like mine, to be in a leadership spot, to be the ones to be the next generation of decision makers. Looking at things like debt relief. So we found that debt became interesting, right, during the pandemic. So it wasn't a traditional sense of debt. Folks are borrowing from relatives or borrowing from these sort of predatory lending models. So how can we build a resiliency fund and debt relief program that is sustainable and equitable and fair and moral at the end of the day? Building up again, CBO capacity is important. And then expanding the regional housing trusts, the gaps, developing more supportive and permanent low-income housing units is a huge one across the county. And so I know one of the other things that I wanted to touch on before we head into our break is that Kate has some amazing news about state dollars and federal money that's actually going to help augment and support and facilitate these programs that we chatted about as well.
Thanks, Carissa. Great. I mean, you captured all the work that has gone into this effort very well in a very short period of time. So thank you for that. So a couple comments. One is that these numbers, you know, should be another digit on them, right? We heard this morning from the childcare people that $12 million would be really nice, but it's probably not going to be enough. But what we tried to do in these sample investment, and this is just, we pulled this from a larger spreadsheet that has every line item for everything that on our wish list of funding. We tried to come up with a sort of a tangible number that a philanthropy organization or a program that the government would provide funding for that could be a little bit more realistic on what we would seeking for funding. So this is just really thinking big, but trying to also keep it real. I mean, I'd love to put $100 million in that childcare one, right? I know Sonia would too. So I just wanted to frame that way. Yeah, so to Carissa's point, there's something called the community, oh my gosh, it's called CERF, Community Economic Resilience Fund, CERF, which is going through its rollout phase. They're just defining the regions of where that funding will be enabled to be applied and the structure of how and the process of how the monies will roll out. But this is something that started out a couple of years ago that I was involved in trying to get legislation through in about the $15 million size. To just get these sort of works going across the state, like what we're doing here in Salinas with Regions Rise. That morphed into this CERF fund, which is now $600 million of funding for our state that will fund these types of regional economic inclusive efforts. So we're super excited about that and the support from the administration and their willingness to put money behind this. I can say that I told somebody very high up in the administration a few years ago, show us the money. Like, it's great that you're singing all this stuff about regionalism, but we need money to implement. And here we are, $600 million. So I guarantee you that our region is going to get more than our fair share of that money so that we can bring these projects to life. So there's state funding that's happening. There's obviously tons of federal funding that's happening. There's philanthropy that's very interested. You'll see on this next slide that we wanted to give some love and a shout out to our funders that made this work possible, the James Irvine Foundation in particular, and California Forward, for providing a ton of human resources, and Ishwarera and his whole fabulous team there at California Forward. So, but there is definitely a seat at the table for philanthropy. Irvine has already expressed interest in continuing to fund this work into the implementation phase. We've had other funders step up. So we're going to do our big reveal, if you will, at the plenary session from the big stage in front of 600 people on November 10th. Of which Carissa is going to be part of. And that will be our kind of pitch. Like, this is what we've come up with. This is our investment blueprint. This is where we need your help to make this come to reality. And this is where you can have a direct impact on the lives of people in our community. So super excited about where this is headed, and built on all this fabulous work that is grounded in the community that we did. We really took the time to do that deep work, which makes this type of project unique, even from other projects that are similar across the state. So I just want to express huge gratitude to Carissa and the entire Regions Rise team, which is a whole slew of people. And I love how you honored Alfred. He was certainly a big part of this work, and we certainly miss him every day as we move forward. Carissa, thank you, my dear. We're at time, so we're going to mosey on down the program road. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us today. Okay, so it was a little break that we have, but we thought, since we're so close here to Halloween with this event, and with proximity of Dia de los Muertos, we thought that we would put together this lovely short video to recognize that beautiful tradition, and one that is rooted in the Hispanic culture of honoring friends and family who have passed. And to me, it's to remind us all that life is ephemeral, and we really want to share this video with you during our short break. So back in a few minutes.
The MA has been celebrating Dia de los Muertos since 1996. The purpose of Dia de los Muertos is to honor death as a part of life. Dia de los Muertos is also a time for us to invite our ancestors back to our homes and also to our homelands. And it's a time to really celebrate their life, and also, again, see death as a part of life. My name is Helen Aldana. I am the Outreach and Inclusion Manager at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. I also organize our annual celebration of Dia de los Muertos with Senderos. Senderos is a local nonprofit based here in Santa Cruz City, and their focus is really on elevating Latinx, Indigenous, and immigrant families and youth here in Santa Cruz as they advance in higher education. We're here at Evergreen Cemetery, where our annual Dia de los Muertos celebration happens. The MA reached out to Senderos to really learn what we need to do as a cultural institution to become a better space for our community. This year, we will be having some altars for people to learn more about the different people buried here in Evergreen Cemetery. We'll be having musical performance right behind me, actually, right over here, and musical performance right over here to my right. It's gonna be a day filled with joy, filled with celebration, filled with emotion, as we honor the different people who have passed in our lives that we love so dearly. And so it'll happen here at Evergreen Cemetery.
My name is Evelyn Salguero. I am a local Santa Cruz artist. Since I started working with the MA and with Senderos through Dia de los Muertos, I have started to be more aware of where I come from and explore that part of my heritage. I was remembering that, and I was watching these two children who I had just painted sitting, talking about their grandmother who had passed away, and it just kind of gave me this flashback of, like, you know, being this little girl and sitting near the gravesite and being with my family. And yeah, they'll remember that. They'll remember how they got their face painted, how they danced, how, you know, all the altars they saw and the colors, because that's what I remember. And that's what, I mean, gives me life, you know, that's what makes me want to participate. I'm really grateful to Helen of the Ma for always thinking of me and calling me and including me. And for the Ma just for showing up for our community. I really appreciate that.
One of the most beautiful things about being a part of the celebration of Dia de los Muertos with Senderos is seeing the impact it's having on the families and the youth to see their presence matters and that the existence of their tradition also matters. In addition, leading up to this event here at Evergreen Cemetery, we will be having a community altar for everyone in the community to contribute objects or photos of their loved ones with the community altar that will be right at the main lobby of the Santa Cruz Mall. We invite everyone to come down here to Santa Cruz at Evergreen Cemetery to look at some local artists, look at some beautiful altars, listen to some beautiful music, and also invite you all to join us at the mall itself and contribute your stories and learn more about Dia de los Muertos.
Great, that was so lovely. I hope you all take advantage of that, whether you're here in Santa Cruz or other places around the region or around the state. There is certainly a celebration near you that you can learn more about this beautiful tradition. Okay, so on with the show. We are at the point in our program that we are going to introduce our keynote, which I'm super excited about. It's my pleasure to introduce JoBen Bevert, the founder and CEO of Joby Aviation. Many of you probably know that Joby is here in our region in the Marina area and also has a presence in Santa Cruz. But they've spent more than a decade developing and testing an all-electric aircraft that can take off and land vertically. So we're going to hear a lot more about that from JoBen, and we're just really excited about not only this whole new green way of getting around, but the fact that it's right here in our own backyard. So with that, JoBen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kate. Okay. Are you guys able to see my screen? Is that playing?
Yeah, we're seeing your screen.
Okay. It's full screen.
Yes, I think you're good.
So thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be able to talk to all of you today about both my background, my grounding and our company's grounding in the Central Coast, and also about this really exciting new mode of transportation that I'm incredibly excited about. So to start with, I thought it would be helpful to give a little grounding in who I am. I was born and raised in the house you can see there. It's up on Last Chance Road, or was up on Last Chance Road. It was no electricity, and it was an incredibly idyllic childhood. I grew up incredibly excited about machines and vehicles, anything that moved, and I loved tractors, and it was really a special place to grow up. We had amazing gardens, and I grew up among a group of people who were incredibly hardworking. We built both homes for ourselves and homes for people around the Santa Cruz area. And so I grew up on the job site. It learned how to build and how to make stuff. Learned a really strong work ethic. The picture on the left is I'm the little boy, and we were.
Sorry, JoBen, we're not seeing slides advancing.
Thank you.
We're just seeing the Joby logo.
I was wondering about. Okay.
There we go.
Well, no, it's I'm gonna have to stop share here and present and then do it. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Sure.
I was concerned about that. I apologize for my incompetence here.
No worries.
Just share my desktop. How about that? Now, are you seeing it full screen? I hope you are. Okay.
We are seeing, yep, there we go. Yep.
Okay. So there's the home I was born and raised in. There's me as a little boy. This is a house that we built when I started building when I was 4. That was it when it was completed, and it was an amazing experience for me to get to be involved in building that house. It was idyllic again, growing up in these beautiful meadows among the redwoods, overlooking the Pacific. I developed a really strong passion for cycling, and was mentored by Jim Langley and Paul Sadoff, and ended up building custom bike frames, including one of the world's first full suspension mountain bikes in the amazing cycling community that is Santa Cruz. I went on to my undergraduate studies at University of California, Davis, and was incredibly fortunate to have an opportunity internship at Muller International. I spent many long hours building and testing wind tunnel models of vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, as well as doing research on batteries for vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. This was in 1992 and 1993. And at that point in time, we were still running nickel metal hydride cells with specific energies of about 40 watt hours per kilogram. And what I determined was that those batteries weren't sufficient to build a compelling electric VTOL. But the projections were that batteries were going to continue to improve at about 6% a year, and that within about 20 years, we would have battery cells where we could build aircraft that would transform transportation. I then went off to grad school at Stanford and studied robotics, and went on to found a robotics company developing robots to help scientists understand molecular biology and do DNA sequencing and diagnostics. And this is one of our robotic systems. It was an amazing company with an amazing that I was able to start with an amazing group of people, and it absolutely fantastic experience. As a side note, at the beginning of the pandemic, many of us came back together and built a company to do COVID testing for schools across California, and it's now the largest COVID testing company in California, and potentially in the nation. I was very fortunate to, while I was at Stanford, as another project, developed a little camera tripod called the Gorilla Pod with a team of students, and subsequently started a company called Joby to market the Gorilla Pod, and it was a incredible success financially, and that gave me the financial freedom to really think about how to give back. And it took me back to my childhood and what I really cared about, and that was making the world a better place. I moved from Palo Alto back to Santa Cruz, for the love of the ocean, the love of the redwoods, kite surfing, mountain biking, gardens, and I've chosen to raise my family here. One of the elements that I really thought about a lot was the impact that our emissions are having on the planet, and specifically emissions from passenger transport, which represent a significant portion of our climate impact. This is last year we had a reminder. I had a very personal reminder of the impact that our actions are having on the planet. We had the largest wildfire that we've had in 70 years with the CZU fire. It released billions of dollars worth of carbon into the atmosphere, and it's a very visceral reminder of just how important it is to change what we're doing on a climate perspective. Unfortunately, 5 of the homes that I had grown up in were burned in fires this last year, including the one that I showed you the picture of that we built when I was 4, as well as the house that I was born in and that I showed you that picture of. So now I'd like to transition to transportation, and each new mode of transportation that we've deployed has increased our daily sphere of influence. It's made our societies more productive, and whether that was rail, the automobile, or airplanes, and allowed us to be more connected as a civilization. So transportation is really powerful. It's very valuable, but ground transportation has reached a breaking point where our infrastructure really can't keep up, and so we also spend a vast amount of our days commuting, many hours a day, every day commuting, and it's our least favorite thing to do. So the question is there a better way? And so my belief is that if we can move from two-dimensional transportation to three-dimensional transportation networks, that it will become a really transformative unlock to our daily mobility. This is not a new dream. People have been dreaming about it for many years, including one of my mentors that I mentioned earlier, Paul Mahler. But it's my belief that electric propulsion is the pivotal unlock, the piece that transitions this from being science fiction to being reality. And over the last 10 years, we've made material progress on that journey. I founded the company with 3 pillars. The first was we need to have an aircraft that's safe enough for everyone to fly every day. Second is that it has to be quiet enough to land where people want to go. And third, it needs to be sustainable, such that we can make this a ubiquitous new mode of transportation that's also safe for our planet. This is our aircraft. It's a 5-seat aircraft, a pilot and 4 passengers. It's 100% electric. It operates on, it stores energy in automotive grade lithium ion cells. It has 6 propellers for redundancy. Those propellers can tilt forward, and it can fly on a wing, and then fly efficiently on its wing. It flies at 200 miles an hour and has a range of up to 150 miles on a single charge. Again, it takes off. It can take off and land vertically, and one of the really the pieces that I mentioned before is that it's really important for it to be very quiet. And we spent more than a decade building propellers that are unprecedented in their acoustics. So just to touch again on the topic of safety, the 6 propellers allow us to have unprecedented redundancy. Each of the propellers is powered by 2 separate electric motors, Each of those electric motors is powered by a separate battery pack and controlled by 3 redundant flight computers. So we've just added redundancy upon redundancy across every aspect of the design of the aircraft for safety. Again, it's critical that it's quiet enough that we can land it in close to where you want to go. And the propeller design has been iterated through many generations to be the quietest propellers that, to our knowledge, have ever been developed. This just gives a little bit of a feel for the noise continuum from the wind in the trees to a jet engine, and a number of other sounds that we experience on a daily basis. And then finally, our aircraft in takeoff, and then our aircraft when it's flying overhead. And so we've worked really hard to make it quiet in takeoff, but it's even quieter when it flies overhead. And we've released some videos that highlight just how far we've come on making really quiet aircraft. And then that last pillar is sustainability. As you can understand from my background, this is something I'm very passionate about. Next week, I'm going to Glasgow for the COP26, the Global Climate Conference. And I have been championing building true zero emissions aircraft in the global aviation community. This is not just aircraft that are zero carbon, but that drive the lowest life cycle emissions possible. And so that's the challenge with aviation today is it's the carbon emissions are only a third of the challenge, the problem. That the contrails and the NOx emissions, the other greenhouse gases that come from burning jet fuel at high altitude, are the other 2/3 of the problem. And so it's really important to look at it holistically from a life cycle perspective. Here's a number of different transportation modes, and our target is to be at the very lowest end of that spectrum in terms of life cycle emissions on a CO2 equivalent, grams of CO2 equivalent per passenger kilometer basis. So that's that's our work in a nutshell. Our goal is to save people time, to make our cities better, to move. This is a map that shows the amount of parking lots, and so this is just vast amounts of city space that are absorbed by the automobile. That doesn't even count the streets and all the space on streets that are tied up for parking. And it would be so much better if our cities could be filled with parks. Every time I go to a city that has really focused on parks, they're just much nicer places to be. And so my goal for the future is a world where more people get to spend more time in green space and beautiful places. Just to kind of summarize what it is, who we are as a company. We've got a just incredibly inspired team of 1,000 people. We love nature. We love being outside. We're very hardworking, and we're dedicated to improving the world. We care deeply about the Central Coast, and our goal is to continue to help this community prosper, to give back for the amazing support that we've had over the years. And with that, I would love to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, JoBen. That was so good. And of course, I've been following this for many years, but I think for people that are just seeing this for the first time, it's pretty mind-bending. So thanks for sharing the video. Maybe what we could do is, yeah, you can just keep that video running or turn that off, whatever you prefer. We have lots and lots of questions coming in on the Q&A. But I'm going to start with picking up on something you were just talking about your team. You said there's about 1,000 people. Can you just tell people a little bit about where those people are and what the plan is as far as a timeline and building out that team and the facilities, specifically in the Marina area?
Yeah, thank you. So we have team members that we were founded in Santa Cruz. We also have an office in San Carlos, but our nexus as we move forward is at the airport and marina. We have a significant amount of space there, and we're bringing additional spaces online. We are hiring aggressively across many disciplines, from engineering to manufacturing, quality control, certification. So there's tons of opportunities in, across the Central Coast, as well as in the Bay Area and around the world. So would love to continue to grow the team with hardworking, passionate people.
Great. And MBEP has been working with your team around pipeline, thinking about pilots and mechanics and all that. And, you're built into our Build Back Better grant, as you probably know, to try to figure out how we bring more funding to bear from the federal government to help with those processes. So lots of exciting opportunity here. And we really want to home grow the talent and minimize the import of those people. Let's talk a little bit about equity. When I first heard about it, I was like, well, isn't it just going to be a bunch of rich people flying in these things above us? I mean, how does that work as far as the vast majority of the population that may or not be able to afford this type of transportation?
Yeah, thank you. So this is a really crucial aspect, and it's one of the pillars of our company, is that we wanted to develop an aircraft which would be affordable to everyone to use every day. So not only did we want it to be the lowest energy consumption, and energy consumption directly correlates with cost. The other really exciting thing about aviation is that it is our lowest cost mode of transport on a per passenger mile basis. We think of it as expensive because we tend to fly long distances in planes. Sorry, the sun's coming out from behind a tree and bringing some glare. So we think of aviation as expensive because if you fly 1,000 miles, it's the ticket price is high, but on it actually is substantially less expensive than driving that same trip. And so, and the reason that is, it's a bit non-intuitive. You're flying in this aircraft that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. The reason is that airplanes last really a long time and they fly really fast. And so the cost per passenger mile of depreciating the capital of that aircraft is really, really low. The other thing that's non-intuitive is, like, you think, oh, well, my pilot makes a really good salary. How is it that pilot's going to be able to fly me and it's going to be affordable? Because the aircraft flies at 200 miles an hour, that pilot can do, like an Uber driver moves at 20 or 30 miles an hour. If the pilot is moving 3 or 4 people and moving them at 200 miles an hour, they're delivering a lot more passenger miles in that hour. And so they can afford to make a much higher salary than an Uber driver and still have a much lower cost per passenger mile. And so again, our goal is to launch at the cost of an Uber, but to drive quickly down to the cost of personal car ownership.
Great. I love that. There's a lot of questions that I think can be captured maybe with one big question is talking about all the, I mean, I know the gory details behind this, but all the stuff you're doing with the FAA. I mean, You're going to be up there flying around. How does that interact with the planes that are already there? How high does it fly? Can you talk I know that you could talk for an hour on this alone. Can you just share with our audience a little bit about the whole technical issues behind flying?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. So we have been working closely with the FAA for many years. We officially applied for type certification in 2018, and then we received our G1 issue paper, the fourth stage 4 of that was completed in 2020. That laid the roadmap for the rest of our certification program. This is the rigorous testing and compliance finding of every single system on the aircraft to demonstrate both to ourselves and to the world that this is safe enough for everyone to fly every day. That's the type certification. The next piece is the production certification. This is the certification of our production operation, saying that we can produce parts in incredibly high quality, very repeatably. The next piece is our Part 135 operating certificate. And this basically gives us the ability to operate as an airline and to move paying passengers. And that we applied for this last summer and expect to receive that 135 operating certificate in 2022.
So that's the gating item as far as the timeline to really, I'm getting a lot of questions here about when do we get a ride? You need to get that certification from the FAA and, God willing, knock wood, in 2022. And then after that, it's a matter of ramping up processes to manufacture. And I think you should probably touch on too the idea that you guys are completely vertically integrated as far as your manufacturing process. And maybe touch on a little of the timeline of when that might roll out, especially again with the facility in Marina.
Yeah, let me just clarify. The Part 135 operating certificate is in 2022. The type we plan to begin commercial operations after the type certificate, and we plan to begin the commercial operations. We expect to begin in 2024. And on the manufacturing, we are as you rightly noted, we're doing our composites manufacturing as well as our final assembly in Marina, and so that's where we're working on that's the nexus of our work on the production certificate.
Great. Yeah. And I think people need to understand that's two different things. As you called out, your manufacturing, which you need FAA certification to be able to produce a plane that meets all the safety requirements, and then actually getting your certification to fly them. So a lot of moving parts, no pun intended, that you guys are managing behind the scenes. And you said there's like 1,000 people that are current employees, which makes you a pretty large employer in the region already. And I've read estimates up to 15,000 employees that you're going to be needing once full production hits and pilots are needed. And somebody was asking about, how do you train up that many people that quickly? And I know a little bit about that. I don't know what you want to share, but maybe you could just touch on how do you attack that problem?
Yeah, well, I would just like to thank you for the partnership, and we're really excited to be working with the schools in the community, including CIS UMB and Cabrillo, UCSC, and it's an incredibly exciting new industry, and we really appreciate the support of the community and all the students, and as you pointed out, whether it's manufacturing folks, quality control folks, mechanics, pilots, there's a large number of opportunities across the spectrum.
And do you think I had this question come in, offering internships? We like internships here at MBEP because it really gives kids real life experience and gives them a taste of what they might be getting into in a real career, and supporting that sort of work-based learning. Do you have any ideas if that might be something either you're doing currently or would enjoy doing going forward?
Yeah, we've had a long history of internships, and it's been a very successful way for for us to grow our talent pipeline. And we have folks who started as interns 10 years ago that are star members of the team today, and we're bringing on people who've been interns this last year as full-time employees now. It's a spectacular opportunity, both for students to learn and as well as for us as an organization to grow.
Excellent. Love that. I know Margaret will be very happy to hear that. Good. And then somebody was asking about I know you're not even flying them yet commercially, but looking forward, is there something like a flying bus that we're going to be seeing from Joby in the future? Like a bigger transportation vehicle?
So I think there are opportunities across the spectrum of different aircraft. I think one of the crucial pieces is keeping them really quiet. And as they get larger, the acoustics get more challenging. So, but yes, so we're really, really pleased with the aircraft we've built, but we do see that there's opportunities for variation.
And can you I'm not sure if you shared the range of the speed, I think is 200 miles an hour, and the range is what?
The current range is up to 150 miles. And again, batteries are continually improve all the time. And so we also see, so we see lots of opportunity for vehicles with improved performance specification as time progresses. Great. And maybe you could just share what it takes to become a Joby pilot. Our pilots currently require 500 hours of flight time, and again, we will be building a team of pilots, and so we're very excited about the opportunities that brings for people who are excited about aviation. Yeah, and a good paying job too. Exactly. So there was a question related to that I just lost here in the chat. There's so many questions. So that person will be an actual pilot, like a pilot today. They will be licensed to fly, so they will know about how to communicate with air traffic controllers and all that. So we're getting some questions about like, how does all that get managed in the sky? And it just would happen exactly how it happens today with any other aircraft, correct? Exactly. Okay. Great. Well, I'd like to put my name on the top of the list for a ride when they're available, as well like 1,000 other people that are that are loving this whole idea. So I'm going to just see if they're going to squeeze in one last question. I think you did touch on the noise issue, which I know is kind of the first place that most people go to when they hear about it. Wait, you're going to land this thing right in my city? I mean, I'm sitting here in downtown Santa Cruz. In theory, there could be a pad, right? Maybe a parking lot on top of the top level of a parking garage that is turned into a little Joby heliport. And you're going to be landing right there in downtown Santa Cruz. So, and then I would get myself over, or maybe you would come pick me up, and then I'd go to that place, and then we go off to San Francisco Airport in 15 minutes or whatever, instead of an hour and 15. And it would just be a wonderful thing. But that noise issue, like I have my office right next to that helipad, or whatever it's going to be called, the Joby pad. Talk a little bit more about that. I think people are really interested in that noise issue. Yeah, exactly. So the key piece is to be able to blend into the background noise level of the city. And so we want to place skyports in areas where the acoustic signature of our aircraft does blend in. And so our mission is to drive that acoustic signature to be as quiet as we possibly can get it, such that the opportunities we have for takeoff and landing locations are as diverse as possible. Yeah. And again, so we can get you as close to your destination as possible. Great. Well, sadly, that is all the time we have today. I know we could go on for another hour or so. It's so fascinating, and just so grateful to have you in our lives and doing what you're doing right here in our backyard. So thank you, JoBen. It's been an honor to have you here sharing your fantastic, inspiring company and you as a person.
Really glad you were able to join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I'm so grateful to this community for all the support over the years. We couldn't have done it without everyone. And we have, as you mentioned, a long journey ahead of us as we scale from 1,000 to tens of thousands of people to bring this dream to life. And can't wait to welcome many more inspired team members. So
great. Thank you again. Take care.
Bye. Thanks, Chair. Bye.
Okay, wow, that was so great. I'm so excited about what's happening with Joby Aviation, and I'm really glad you all got to hear a little bit more about what's going on here right in our own backyard. So yay. So we're going to pivot now, and we're going to talk about the funding that we've sort of alluded to throughout the morning. As far as American Rescue Funds, there's been millions of dollars that we keep hearing about from the feds and from the state that are flooding into our region. And we're really excited about the unprecedented amounts of capital that are coming in. But, I'm always wondering exactly how that's benefiting our region. Like where is that money, all that money going? So we're going to hear today, we're really lucky to have Congressman Jimmy Panetta and Senator John Laird with us. They're going to be sharing a little bit more about all that good stuff as far as monies that are coming into the region. But I think it's so topical, and I haven't actually been able to be on my phone much this morning. But Jimmy, I'm going to start with you because there's so much buzz out right now about the federal infrastructure package and the Biden thing. I mean, we're talking about, if I understand correctly, a $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure package and a $1.75 trillion spending bill that Biden has put forth. So since that's sort of hot off the press and top of mind, maybe we'll start with you and you can just share a little bit about that, maybe break some news here on our MBEP stage, and then we'll go on to talk more about the existing funds that are here.
No, I appreciate that, Kate. Thank you. And thanks for this opportunity to be a part of another outstanding MBEP production, I should say. And obviously it's honored. I'm honored to share it with my good friend and our faithful public servant, John Laird. So I really appreciate this opportunity. There's a reason why I'm stuck in my office in Washington, D.C. right now and dressed like this. One was because of what happened yesterday in regards to the issues that came about of potentially passing it, but not, and then having to stay here last night, and not being able to catch my plane home. And that once I end this interview, I'm going right to the airport and getting on a plane and getting back home, which I can't wait to do. But obviously what you're hearing about today, to be frank, and what we've heard about in the last couple of weeks, is, look, you're seeing legislation happening in the open. You're seeing the sausage being made within the Democratic Party in a very transparent way, if I can say so myself. And obviously, what you're seeing is negotiations on the infrastructure bill amongst the administration and amongst Congress and amongst various factions in the Democratic Party. Which that's fine, to be honest with you, because it's showing basically not only how diverse and how dynamic the Democratic Party is, to be frank, but it's also showing some of the varied interest of our party across the country. And obviously some of the, like I said, some of the interests that different politicians have, depending on where they come from and who they represent, which I think everybody needs to understand in regards to, like I said, the diversity, the Big Tent party that we are. Now, what is the infrastructure plan? And let me just try to explain this briefly as to what's going on. You kind of nailed it talking about the two plans, and there is two plans. As I like to say it, there's, and you hear these weird names, there's the BIF and the BBB. So yeah, there's the BIF, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Plan, that is really the hard infrastructure. And then there's the Build Back Better Act. And now what I would say is the human infrastructure. Now, the BIF, the hard infrastructure, that's a bill that has already been passed out of the Senate that focuses on what? Hard infrastructure: roads, rail, rural broadband, buses, bridges, airports, seaports, e-buses, e-boats, ferries, e-charging stations, grid reliability, grid resiliency, and of course, water projects, something we need here. And then the Build Back, and that, like I said, that's passed out of the Senate, bipartisan basis. Now that's over in the House of Representatives. However, what we're working on and the negotiations you're hearing about is the Build Back Better Act, which is the human infrastructure. 1.75 is the number we've agreed upon. So it's not that we're, disagreeing on the number at this point. We're just kind of dealing with the details at this point, to be honest with you. And that's one where you're going to see basically a funding provided for a number of areas that, like I said, focuses on our human infrastructure, mainly our green economy. How can we do better and to address the effects of climate change? Finally, we're doing something. And that's obviously, we're going to do it in way of tax incentives so that there's more green buses, green cars, and even green bikes, e-bikes that are out there. Linear generators, microgrids, solar, wind, hydrogen, geothermal investments. Universal pre-K, childcare, expansion of the child tax credit, approving accessibility and affordability to healthcare, home care workers so that they can get paid more worker training at our community colleges, expanding our Pell Grants, more funding for ag research, something that's important to us on the Central Coast, and yes, funding for 1 million affordable housing units. So these are the two big bills that we're working on right now. I'm confident that we're going to pass something very soon. I'm confident that it's going to pass. I know better than to say when, although I do believe it's going to be very soon. And I do believe it's something that's needed now more than ever. Yesterday, the president came and spoke to the Democratic caucus and basically said what I agree with, is that now is an inflection point for us and for who we are as a nation. Yes, with our infrastructure investment going forward, but also to keep up with basically our competitors abroad. This cannot be the China century. It has to be the American century. And basically, in looking at our democracy, basically, we need to show them that our government works. Despite what you're seeing on TV, I am confident that you're going to see a bill passed out of Congress, signed by the president, that deals with our infrastructure investment, that demonstrates that democracy is the way for the future, that it is going to be the American century.
Great. Well, that was a lot. And the one word I really like to hear there that our panel that was on previously will love to is childcare. You probably weren't able to join our session at that point, but lots of money needed for childcare. We had a really robust conversation about that. So John, Senator Laird, thank you for making time to be here in your busy schedule. It's so great to see you. How are you? And tell us what's going on with some of the monies that are already here. We heard from Jimmy what's coming, but what about what's already here?
Thank you. It's great to be with you. I have an unstable internet connection, and if I drop, I will be right back.
Yeah.
And let me say, it's tough to follow. It's tough to follow Joe Ben, but I will be in Glasgow and hopefully our paths will cross there. And it's great to be with Jimmy Panetta. And I even see Robert Rivas is here as well. Jimmy's been a real partner. And before I get to the answer to your question, some of the things that came out of this budget and legislative session for the Central Coast were very significant economically. And Jimmy has worked assiduously to get the money for the Pajaro levy project, and the governor signed my bill to buy out the local share so that we won't depend on a Prop 218 election. We just know the state will put in the money that the federal government doesn't, and we will get that project built. And Robert Rivas, who's on the call, was a help with that. We also got big money for homelessness in Santa Cruz to try to break the cycle there. We got some things for Monterey. So it was very good. And if you look at what happened at the state level, dollars above the project in 2004 and 5 and 6, our entire general fund budget was $102 billion.
John,
we had 75
I think you're going to have to turn off your video,
more,
if you can hear
including
me.
the federal money. And so our strategy was to put okay.
Sorry, video. This just emphasizes the need for better broadband, doesn't it? Isn't it ironic? But yeah, your video is maybe if you turn that off, we could hear you better, but you're kind of breaking up. Did we lose you altogether? I think we might have. Okay, back to you, Jimmy. And as John mentioned, Robert Rivas is online, but he actually has his own session, so he's not going to be chiming in for this particular part of our program. But so tell us what what are your top priorities for the region? As we look at the monies that have already been deployed and where you're seeing them really make a difference in our communities here in the Central Coast.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at the strategy that was deployed, I will say, because I do believe it was that wartime effort that was needed when it came to fighting the pandemic. You look at the strategy, and clearly it was one of federally funded, state mandated, locally executed, as I like to say. And so from a federal level, we did our part. I mean, we passed, I think, 6 major record-setting bills that injected, like you said, trillions into the US economy. And obviously a significant amount of that came right into the Central Coast of California. And obviously it went to counties and cities. And I'm not going to bore you with the numbers. I think many of people who are on there know the numbers, and they can tell you the significant amounts that came in to their counties and cities. But also our schools, K through 12, got millions. Our colleges, from our community colleges to our 4-year colleges, got millions. Our airports even got millions. And rental assistance was obviously was there and still is there in order to provide people with funding so that they can stay in their apartments, not just through the pandemic, but even now as we get through the pandemic going forward. And obviously with the the Paycheck Preparedness Act, PPP loans that are there. Significant amounts of small businesses took advantage of that, which affected hundreds of thousands of jobs in our area. So these are the types of areas that I think was important to realize that, with that federal funding, with the locals actually taking that funding and executing it, you saw significant contributions that really, I believe, got us through to where we are at this point, kept our economy afloat, kept our poverty rate flat, and really kept us in that race between injections versus infections that we're at right now. And so, like I said, I believe the federal government played our part, but what you saw is this really was a partnership in order to deal with this pandemic.
Yeah, no, that's great. I know that MBEP took advantage of the PPP, and we would have had to lay off staff and been in a really bad place if we weren't able to take advantage of those monies. So yes, thank you, thank you. I know that John is back with us just via phone though. Sorry, we won't have him on video, but John, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Oh, good, you said great.
Yeah, and let me just pick up because it addresses one of the points you made right at the beginning, which is then we budgeted for impact in the budget in a number of places. And one of the major ones that you mentioned was in childcare. So we basically increased the slots that the state were funded, we increased the rates for reimbursement, and we increased the salaries for the employees. And it should lead to at least 100,000, if not hundreds of thousands of more slots. And that is really a key to the economy and economic development. We also did student aid. We added 100,000 people to student aid. We lowered the age to Medicaid to 50. We dealt with major homelessness money. We did 6 to 7 billion for broadband, which we hope to see in the Central Coast to try to expand the broadband opportunities. And then we did the things that are sort of the state part of what Jimmy was just talking about, small business assistance. And in the budget, we did it in early actions in February, and then we did 3 more rounds of small assistance grants, and some will be coming in this next year. We did the rental assistance sort of to match what the state did, and did emergency financial aid for community college students. We did money to revitalize California tourism as it comes back from the pandemic. We were doing our best, and we did in February a Golden State stimulus. The state has never done a stimulus the way the feds did, and we did $8 billion in February to really do grants and payments to individuals making under $75,000. and helped with the earned income tax credit to try to put money in the pockets of people as they were struggling with the effects of the pandemic. So we tried to take a lot of it and put it back to people that were struggling, and also to put it in intractable problems, whether it was homelessness, childcare, Medicaid, or other places, which are actually very key to the economy because it really will help people go back to work and support them being in work. And so it was an amazing year. And now the governor announced that there's already a surplus really building to next year. And some of us want to see grants directly for affordable housing projects, but we have to work out the housing disconnect between the building trades to be able to make those projects pencil out. But we're going to have some extra money, barring another surge or an economic meltdown between now and June 30th, that will allow us to do some additional things in the coming year. And I should just also say one other thing related to the Central Coast. The atmospheric river notwithstanding, we have a horrible drought going on. And if you look at Nacimiento and San Antonio and in Monterey County, they're at something like 9% and 10% of normal. Before the atmospheric river, the Santa Cruz Reservoir was at 52%. There have been real issues, and we have a package of Central Coast drought relief in the budget. It got moved to after next June 30th, but we're doing early action items in the budget quite likely, and I'm going to try to get it moved up because I don't think this drought is going away, and we're going to need some emergency help. I mean, one of the projects was in the Monterey Peninsula, where if you have one additional injection well with the pure water project, you can get more water in and more water out over the short term. And I think that's our challenge, is if it's not going to rain heavily, what do we do short term to patch everybody through, whether you're a homeowner or a business? So we were working on those things in the budget as well.
Great. Well, you kind of stole my next question about, top priorities for the region as we move into the next session. It certainly sounds like housing and climate change, water issues, all that is definitely sounds like top of your wish list.
It is. And also we did a bunch of money for resilience on fire, and that is going to continue to go ahead. And the governor signed my bill because thus far, whatever we do for fire prevention, prescribed fire, fuels treatment, forest management is just what we put in the budget every year. And I did a bill that said, we'll have a 5-year plan, we'll set out goals, we'll have transparent measurements, and then it'll tell us whether we should be putting more to that and what we're actually getting for our money. And poor Big Sur, they have burned 3 times in the last 12 years. And of course, the Carmel Valley, East Carmel Valley, the Santa Cruz Mountains, all those are issues. And we have a lot of things that we have to do there. And we have to make sure the money that comes from the state isn't just going to a state agency, that it's coming to local fire safe councils, and it's enabling people to do things. So we have a lot on our plate, and we have to see how we're coming back from the pandemic, because schools are showing enrollment levels that are lower than pre-pandemic. Community colleges, K through 12, we at the state level fund on the basis of enrollment, and we've been giving school districts a hold harmless to June 30th. But if enrollment's not back, we would be in a position under our current formulas of cutting school funding next year. And I don't think we want to do that. So we're going to have, and if you just look at local issues, the Bonnie Doon School District, which is small, 27% of the student body in that district lived in a house that burned down. And they were able to survive in part because it was remote. So wherever they were, they could continue doing remote learning. And we have to make sure that some of the people that were hit by fires like that school district, are held harmless coming out. We did it for Paradise. We did it for some of the places in Sonoma and Napa County. So we're going to have to do it for Bonnie Doon and any other place in our region that suffered those kinds of economic losses.
And let me just, and I appreciate everything. Let me just talk about a couple of things that John mentioned, if I could piggyback on that, of course. On the childcare, I think one of the things that really was transformative in the American Rescue Plan was our expansion of the child tax credit, something that in the limited amount of months that we increased the child tax credit, you saw child poverty rate drop by almost 40% across our country. It affected 150,000 children here on the Central Coast of California. That's something that we're going to continue to fight for in this human infrastructure, and that to increase that and expand that going forward, because it's so important. Also, when it comes to one of the priorities in this area, of course, water, some of the, just to give you a number of what was in the BIF, the hard infrastructure plan, $8.3 billion, that's a B, billion dollars for water projects just in the Western United States, which is going to be very, very important, obviously, for us out here. And then, of course, building off the good work that John has done at the state level, what we're doing for our federal lands when it comes to not just fire suppression, but fire prevention. One of the bills, my bills, got into the hard infrastructure plan, and that's called the Replant Act, because as we've seen, during, when there are wildfires, that land crusts over. And then when there are extreme rains, extreme weather events like we've seen, the flooding can really build up. That's why we need to spend money to replant and reforest our trees, which can also go to carbon capture as well. So these are some of the, like you said, Kate, there's a lot to talk about in these bills. We can go on and on. These are just some of the things that John reminded me to talk about based on what we're doing at the federal level.
It's funny you talk about reseeding and getting replanting done. One of the projects as part of this Build Back Better grant that we submitted all around aeronautics and drones, one of the really cool things you can do with drones that they're working on, and one of the companies that's involved in this is doing reseeding with a drone. So it can fly over these more remote areas and have figured out a way to get a little tree on their drones to land it and get that planted remotely. So some really fascinating innovations happening in that area.
And they were doing that actually with fighting fires as well. They were using drones to drop the gas balls down into the fires to create the backfires as well. So you're right. And let me tell you something. Joe Ben was out here in Washington, D.C. this week at a conference dealing with the future of U.S. transportation. And let me tell you, he stole the show. I didn't see the conference itself. I came in after, and he was like a rock star out here. It really just tells you how lucky we are to have someone like that on the Central Coast. He's really bringing creative ideas, not just for us here at home, but across the country.
Yeah, no, he is a rock star. It's so cool. Hey, so speaking of innovations in transportation, John, I know you're going to Glasgow next week. And to the I think that's called the COP, the COP26 conference. A lot of people are going to be there. I believe our own governor is going to be there. What are you hoping to get out of that? And what are you thinking that how would those learnings benefit our region here?
Well, one of the major things is that California is way behind in offshore wind development. And we passed a bill the governor signed that actually sets goals for it. And the two places that are proposed for the first offshore wind are Humboldt and off of San Luis Obispo County. And I've been working really closely since I have San Luis Obispo in the district with the locals that are in support. Traditionally, that doesn't happen. And we have, whether it's Moss Landing, Morro Bay, or the decommissioning nuclear plant in Diablo Canyon, we have all this transmission. And if we turn battery storage and then offshore wind, we have the ability to develop these renewables, create the jobs, and replace what went with the fossil fuel or nuclear with other jobs and do it. So I'm going with other legislators to see Scotland's offshore wind and meet with the people that are doing it when I'm there. And I had a role in Governor Brown's International Climate Conference in 2018, and fire and oceans and acidification and forests were really central to that. And so I am really hoping to meet with people from other countries, find out what they're doing, see if we learn anything, see if there's something that we can transfer to California and the Central Coast. In addition to, I even texted Joe Ben while he was speaking, I already have a text back saying, I hope our paths cross there. And I hope I get to see what he's doing, and appreciate the fact of what Jimmy said, that we have a Central Coast rock star that will probably be the same in Glasgow. And so it is really, what lessons can you take from other places? And I will know a lot of people there because I spoke at the International Oceans Conference at the United Nations in 2017, and we organized on ocean acidification with other countries of the world. And so I'm hoping to pick up some of those efforts. And the governor just announced, I think since you've been on this, that he is turning his participation to virtual, which is a disappointment. He says he has family obligations, but there will be my successor as Secretary of Resources, the head of the Air Board, many other officials from the state, as well as many other legislators. And so I'm really hoping that we can really stake out some stuff for California while we're there.
Great. Well, we're getting shy on time, and I just want to be conscious of that. We have a great question from Jeanette in the chat, or in the Q&A rather, and wondering if either of you could speak to how the Biden 30 by 30 effort and the Newsom 30 by 30 executive order might work together for helping the Central Coast build climate resiliency. Who wants to take that?
Well, I guess from the federal level, I think, obviously it's created a discussion out here, which is important because we didn't see that obviously with the last administration. But fortunately, it's not just you're not just having words, but you're seeing those words in the deeds. And we're starting with this infrastructure plan, to be honest with you, with these major tax incentives that are something that are basically, like I said, the first step in our way to ensuring that we can green our energy sector and green our transportation sector, the two ways that we can the quickest ways that we can reduce our carbon output. So in regards to the 30 by 30, obviously those are discussions that continue to need to be had. For us out here on the Central Coast, there's a number of aspects to it. One of the things that I'm watching is obviously how do we get our people in agriculture involved in that discussion as well. I firmly believe that our producers are some of the most progressive, based on my experience in talking to producers across the country. I firmly believe that our Central Coast producers are the most, like I said, progressive when it comes to sustainable agriculture. But we just got to make sure that they are at the table when it comes to these types of discussions, especially when it comes to the 30 by 30 and what they can reasonably do with our specialty crops going forward. Some types of mechanisms like coverage crops works fine in other seasonal crops, but our specialty crops, it may not work. So we just got to make sure that their voices are heard going forward in these types of discussions. What will continue to be had, and obviously working with the state of California is one of the ways we can do it.
And Kate, I know we're just about out of time, so let me just add that the governor set the goal, but he didn't prescribe what came under the goal, and he's leaving that to a report he's announcing and to us. And for Jeanette's edification, we want to do exactly what Jimmy talked about, because there's also in sustainable agriculture, I pioneered that program at Resources, and some of the best places are in the Central Coast for doing that. And I think they are really a key to the puzzle, and not converting prime ag land. But we have a chance in Jeanette's Ballywick and other places up and down the coast. We have 14,000 acres of Diablo Canyon lands that we can use with regard to 30 by 30. We have a Big Sur trail we have to build. We have a trail across the Hearst easement. We have the reconstruction, or whatever you call it, reforestation and rebuilding from the fire in Santa Cruz and Big Basin Park. And so we have a whole host of things that I think would be eligible for the 30 by 30. And I think Jimmy and I, what we would do is since the president and the governor have been great at setting out the goals, I think we want to make sure that there are all these things in the Central Coast that happen under those goals. And I think that's our challenge, is putting the flesh on the bones and making sure that we're in the mix when that happens.
Awesome. Well, that was an excellent note to end on. I wanted to thank you both so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. John, sorry about the technical issues, but I'm glad we got to at least hear your voice, and we look forward to seeing you live and in person sometime soon. Jimmy, safe flight back home, and look forward to seeing you in a week or so in Monterey at the California Economic Summit.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you both. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Wow. I don't know about you guys. I need a break for a second here. Let's do a little stretch. Oh, okay. So we are going to move on to another excellent representative and public servant for our region, Assembly Member Rob Rivas, who I have come to know and admire immensely in the work that we do here at MBEP. He is going to share some initial findings of a state assembly housing working group tour that just took place earlier this month. And it went all over our region, Salinas Valley, all the way down to Big Sur, and then it moved on to other parts of the state. But he's going to tell us a little bit about why he wanted that tour to happen, what they learned from it, and what's coming up next specifically to housing. As we heard from both Jimmy and John, housing is obviously a huge issue for us here in the region. And I know Rob is working hard to fix that. So Rob, we're going to turn the tables over to you now.
Hey, Kate, it's always great to see you. I'm so glad I was able to sit into the previous session with my two good friends, our Congress member and John Laird, who I've had the pleasure to know for about 20 years. And so having the opportunity to work with him now has been, certainly exciting. But really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this program, to say a few words. And I am just wrapping up my third full year in the California State Legislature. I've had this incredible opportunity to represent the 30th Assembly District in the State Assembly. This is a region, a place where I've lived my entire life. And so it's special to have this opportunity to represent my home. And our district, for those of you guys who may not know, includes parts of 4 counties: the county of Monterey, San Benito, Santa Clara, and Santa Cruz counties. It is a diverse district where it's a diverse region. It includes large swaths of agricultural land, some of the most some productive agricultural land anywhere in our state. Which includes the Salinas and the Paro valleys. It also includes the coastal beauty of Big Sur, one of the most iconic coastal areas anywhere in the world. And this is a district that reaches north to the borders of the Silicon Valley, one of the most affluent areas anywhere that you'll find in the world. But again, it's great to be here. And I was asked to share and provide a recap about the work I've been doing as a part of as a member of this California Assembly Housing Work Group that I helped to organize, and the subsequent housing tour that I've been on across the state, and the specific tour that I helped organize and host here in our own region of Monterey Bay. But I think it was appropriate, or it would be appropriate, to start with just a brief recap of this past legislative year. And I assume most, if not all of you here, are well aware of the progress that was made. But a high level a summary is, first, as a state, we appropriated more state dollars to address housing and homelessness issues than any other previous budget in the history of our state. It's a state budget that included $2.75 billion for Project Home Key over the next 2 years. And on our tour, we heard a lot of positive things of this current program that was established amid this pandemic by our governor and his administration, in really reducing barriers and increasing decreasing the amount of time it takes to get these projects off the ground and get people housed. But these funds, again, will be used to ensure that we develop permanent housing for people experiencing homelessness through the conversion of hotels, motels, new construction, and some modular units. I was very proud of the work our office did to help secure a total of $130 million for the Joan Cerna Farm Worker Housing Grant Program, something incredibly important to our region and agricultural regions across the state. This is a state budget that also allocated $2 billion for the Houseless Housing Assistance Program for our continuums of care for counties, for big cities to address homelessness across the state. We also passed very important housing legislation, specifically Senate Bills 9 and 10, that will provide homeowners and local governments tools to add critically needed new housing. And so overall, there is no question that this legislative year, the governor, the state legislature, we demonstrated a commitment to tackling California's housing crisis. But when you consider the enormity of our state's housing problem, of our housing crisis, and the complexity of these housing problems, we obviously didn't do nearly enough, such as in prior years. And so once again, we'll begin this next legislative year working to do more, searching for some solutions to this historic problem. Certainly what I've learned in my short time in the legislature is this is a state where there's no shortage of some crises. And at the top of the list is housing and homelessness. As we know, we're the most prosperous state in the country. And at the same time, we have the highest rate of poverty in this state, which is driven by housing and lack of affordability. And so it's for these reasons why I worked with some of my assembly colleagues to organize an assembly housing work group. And our intent, our goal as a group was to bring legislators together to discuss housing, to engage with one another, to listen and to learn and to gain a clearer understanding of housing issues across the state, but in particular, to try to understand the politics of housing when it comes to these very sensitive issues in all parts of the state. We were very intentional in forming a work group that included members of the legislature from all parts of California, representing every major region of the state. And so this past month, with my colleagues, we toured our state. We toured the state of California. We had organized visits in the Bay Area, in the Central Valley, in Los Angeles, the Inland Empire, in San Diego, and then our own Monterey Bay region of the Central Coast. And so during each visit, we had a high-level discussion. We had high-level engagement into the real challenges that these regions and these communities in these regions that they're facing. That they're facing when it comes to housing affordability, housing availability, increased levels of housing insecurity and homelessness, and then we had a candid discussion of the challenges, the struggles of finding appropriate and acceptable some solutions to addressing these issues. And so our work group intends to release a report that will detail our findings. But for me, no matter the region we visited, it became absolutely clear that we're still faced with addressing two seemingly intractable housing issues, and that's location and cost. First, location, major issues remain regarding where housing is built, where housing is going to be built. And second is cost. One of the most significant issues affecting housing affordability here in California is related to how infrastructure is financed and who can afford to live in and stay here in our state. And as we know, low and moderate income households live with home prices and rents that far outstrip basic affordability standards. Even upper income households pay more for housing relative to their income here in California than in most parts of our country. And what new affordable housing there is, as we all know, has largely been added in non-urban places like our very own, the Salinas Valley and Soledad and Greenfield, King City, and places like San Benito and the South Valley of Santa Clara County, Gilroy and Morgan Hill. And it has resulted in steadily increasing traffic congestion, a decline in our overall quality of life, and really has resulted in unfair opposition to all forms of housing and future housing that is absolutely needed. And as I mentioned, I was proud to coordinate and organize a tour stop here in our region. And our focus was around workforce housing, housing for our farm and agricultural workers, housing for our hospitality workers, two of the largest and most important industries to our local and regional economy. And so some of the solutions that were discussed by experts on our tour stop were one, making historic housing investments and tax credits permanent. Second, creating affordable housing infrastructure fund for local jurisdictions to decouple infrastructure from housing. Another one was ensuring that we prioritize review of affordable housing projects at the state level to reduce timelines associated with affordable housing and avoid unexpected some delays and the issuance of some permits. And for farm worker housing, stakeholders proposed increasing HCD funding from 10% to 20%, allocating more funding for more HCD staff, and conducting a statewide study or assessment on farm worker housing needs. A very good study that was done in our region, the Pajaro and Salinas Valley, that was released, I believe, in 2017, 2018. They also noted the need to address and fix the federal state tax credit allocation, the committee's rural a definition, which according to this current rural definition doesn't include city of Watsonville, Salinas, Hollister. I don't even think it includes Bakersfield, and should consider allocating funds by farm acreage, employment, and or overcrowding. And so obviously these ideas aren't prescriptive, but because as we all know, every region of the state has unique housing circumstances, and we know full well that one size does not fit all for housing some solutions for our state. There's no silver bullet, but again, the tour was incredibly educational. Proud of the work we did in our housing tour stop to educate my colleagues on the unique housing needs and challenges we face here on the central coast of the Monterey Bay. And I look, certainly, again, appreciate the opportunity to share these words, and would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Kate.
Wow, thank you. Lots of good stuff. And thank you so much for your leadership on this. It's such an important issue. There's some really good work that's been done, and looking forward, I think we're really getting the momentum to get some legislation in place and some funding that's really going to help curb the tide. But like you said, it's a big, huge problem that we need some real innovation to figure out how we're going to solve it. So the working group was great, and that was again something that you kind of came up with and were able to implement and really learn from that and inform the legislation going into next year. I didn't hear you talk, if I missed it, I'm sorry, about ADUs. There were some questions about ADUs. Is that something also you see as one piece of the puzzle piece?
Yeah, and that's why I made mention of the report that will be issued in the weeks ahead that really will detail findings from our tour and all the stops throughout our state. But ADUs certainly were a topic of some discussion. In a lot of ways, ADUs have worked very well in some communities. It's helped address a lot of need in housing people. It's also created opportunity for homeowners to add a unit and add that rental income to their portfolios, I guess. But certainly it's been a very unique way, and a lot of work has been invested in previous years, even prior to my time in the legislature. But it is something that has really is taken off in a lot of some jurisdictions, and it's gone a long way to increase housing options for many families and for many people where it works for them, whether they are single, whether they are some millennials, younger, whether they're senior citizens. It's helped to diversify housing options, which we really lack throughout the state. It's either these large multifamily structures we have, or in apartment buildings, or we have single family homes. And so it's been a positive thing. But certainly I think in addition to ADUs, we did hear a lot about assistance and support, wraparound services that are being offered for homeless individuals, and in that those transitional housing units have been critical in our larger urban areas. But not only offering those transitional units and housing units, but offering services on site to get people back on their feet. So again, once we have that report done, I'd be happy to share it with MBEP.
Yeah. You'll be looking forward to learning more about that. I know that the Home Key project in Salinas got lots of love and attention, and so well deserved. And we actually awarded them earlier this year with one of our public-private partnership awards. And it's great that more of those types of wraparound services and fully supportive housing are being explored and expanded in our region. So, and those of you that don't know, ADU is accessory dwelling unit. I probably shouldn't be throwing around acronyms like that. So for those that aren't as familiar with the ins and outs of housing, that's a one tool in the toolbox. I know I would love to put one in my part of my property that I could build one, and we'll hear in a little bit from Boxable, and that's a really exciting way for people to put in single unit kind of things that are coming down the pike. So we look forward to hearing more about that too.
And I should have mentioned this, Kate, but I'm glad you asked that question, because there's still a lot of barriers to successfully getting affordable ADUs in place. You know, a lot of red tape still exists. You talk about modular units, there's still ways that we can streamline the process, bring down costs, whether it's in the materials that are used. You talk about, you know, one of the common themes across the state, whether it was with ADUs or just the production housing, was infrastructure. You know, how we finance infrastructure is certainly, you know, a very large hurdle to overcome when we are trying to achieve housing affordability.
Yeah. Yeah, and we hear a lot of here at MBEP about, you know, the obstacles of putting in sewage and all those sort of basic infrastructure that is then preventing housing from being built. So, you know, it's a multi-headed beast, this housing crisis, and there's lots of ways to tackle it. And we're so appreciative of everything that you're doing. You've been such a tremendous asset to this region and all the fabulous work you're doing. So keep up the good work, and we're really grateful for your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. See you soon.
Okay, great. We are going to move right into our next speaker. I'm really excited about this presentation. I've had the pleasure of seeing it already, which is why I asked Michael Applegate to join us today and really help us understand how measuring systematic inequities in our education system could lead to a more equitable opportunities for children of youth and of color in our community. So he's got some pretty eye-opening data he's going to share with us. So I'll just leave it with that teaser and hand it over to you, Michael. Thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kate. And also thank you to you and MBEP for the invitation to share with you all today. I'm honored to share the stage with so many who are doing great work in our community, and I'm excited for all the discussion about equity today. I also want to say thank you to the Bright Futures Racial Equity Task Force, and also to the steering partners, many of whom are here today. And especially thank you to all of those who are already working to change the things that I'm going to talk about today. And so with that, I'd like us to all get uncomfortable. And I'm not seeing, there we go. I'd like us to all get uncomfortable. I'm sure everyone here has seen this photograph of two young girls doing their schoolwork outside of a Taco Bell in Salinas in order to get internet access in the middle of a pandemic. And I'd like to start by thinking about how you felt when you first saw it. These children clearly don't have the best opportunity we can provide to learn. And we know that a lack of internet access at home isn't something that impacts all children in our community equally. In response to the photo, State Senator Kevin De Leon said, "This is California, home to Silicon Valley, but where the digital divide is as deep as ever, where 40% of all Latinos don't have internet access, and that this generation deserves better." At Bright Future is measuring the local digital divide by race and ethnicity, like Senator De Leon described, is a metric that we're working on. And for the next 10 minutes, we're going to talk about the importance of measuring systemic differences in opportunity. In that conversation, it's important to not lose sight of the humanity. The numbers, percentages, and measurement that we'll talk about today represent people's lives, future dreams, and opportunities of children and youth in our community, like the two little girls that are in this photo. Before we jump in, I'll add that in almost all instances, these systems that we're going to talk about that the currently are systems that the current leaders in our community inherited. So today isn't about blame, it's about building the thriving community that we want to see in our region. So now that everyone's uncomfortable, let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Applegate. I'm the Data and Research Manager at Bright Futures here in Monterey County. And we're working locally and nationally to think about how measurement supports shifting systems so that all youth, families, and those experiencing poverty have the opportunity to reach their fullest potential. One of the places we begin the work at Bright Futures is considering the outcomes that we're trying to improve. For you, that might look like whether or not the leadership in your organization is as diverse as our community. Or maybe you might consider whether or not certain groups have a longer tenure or perhaps faster career advancement within your organization. For us, it's outcomes like this, like whether or not children are reading on grade level in elementary school. And currently in Monterey County, 51% of third grade students are reading on grade level, or about half of students. And when we disaggregate this number by race and ethnicity, we see huge disparities in outcomes of almost 30 percentage points between African American and Latinx students compared to white students. And I want you to consider why you think that is. In our work, many people often see the 9 and 10-year-old students or their families as being at fault. And because of the disparities in outcomes, especially Black and Latino children and families. But today, I'd like to propose that this quote that many of you are familiar with from Deming is in fact true, that every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. And if we want to get different results, we have to figure out where we need to change the system that is producing them. And previously, we only had measures of student performance. We didn't track any measures of system performance. And we knew if we wanted to shift systems, we had to start to quantify systemic inequities. Now, there are many aspects of the system that support or hinder student learning, and we can't possibly cover them all today. We're working on tracking 7 systemic indicators in education, and today I'm going to introduce you to 3 of them. These indicators were decided upon collaboratively with representation from several local organizations, including MBEP, the United Way, the Monterey County Office of Education, Building Healthy Communities, Hartnell, Monterey Peninsula College, Bright Beginnings, First 5, and many others. So let's get into the first calculation, per pupil funding. We measure funding, if you could advance to the next slide, please. We measure funding disparities in a couple of different ways, but I'm going to show you the one that I think is the most straightforward. In this case, I'm only using unified districts, which means that the district includes schools from kindergarten all the way through high school. I also wanted to compare districts that were somewhat similar in size. So all these districts also have at least 1,000 students. From there, I put them into 2 groups. It looks like the slide isn't rendering correctly, but that top group is school districts, unified school districts that are majority of color. And the bottom group is unified school districts that are majority white students. And so once I had those districts separated, I then calculated the average funding per student in these districts. And in 2019-2020, the majority of color unified school districts in Monterey County were funded at an average of $14,000 per pupil, whereas the majority white school districts were funded at an average of $22,000 per pupil. And if you advance to the next slide, if the majority of color unified districts in our county were funded at the same average rate as the white districts, that would equate to an additional $172 million per year, or $2.2 billion over the 13 years from kindergarten through 12th grade. Now, of course, this also means that the students in the majority white districts have numerous likely advantages, like perhaps more tutoring or more academic counselors or newer technology, more mental health staff, teachers and staff with more experience, better facilities, more extracurricular activities, and so on. And let's tie these disparities. I mentioned the outcomes that at the beginning that we're trying to improve at Bright Futures. The Public Policy Institute of California last week came out with a study that said that statewide, an additional $1,000 per pupil in funding led to an approximate 13% improvement in English language arts scores and an 18% improvement for math in districts with the highest needs students. So most of the gaps in outcomes, it looks like, could be eliminated through funding. These funding disparities are largely because of differences in property taxes, which partially fund schools. And I would be remiss here to not say a little bit about how this relates to the local history of property ownership and values. As many of you know, redlining was a system of determining which groups of people and neighborhoods were eligible for home loans and had the impact of nearly all, or 98% of government-backed home loans going exclusively to whites. And at the same time, local racial covenants in home deeds in cities like Carmel, Pacific Grove, parts of Monterey, and Seaside excluded the sale and resale of homes to people of color. These national and local policies not only segregated communities of color from white people, they also led to massive wealth accumulation, targeting billions of dollars of wealth exclusively to whites, which of course has impacts on the opportunities of subsequent generations. And just to reiterate here, this all occurred within the lifetimes of most people who are present for this presentation today. So now let me switch to another systemic indicator. This one is around the race and ethnicity of teachers relative to the student body. In Monterey County, 12% of the students are white. So in a system where white and students of color had an equal chance of having a teacher of their same race, 12% of the teachers would also be white. But are more than 5 times the percentage of white teachers as the percentage of white students. 61% of the teachers are white. This has implications for the student outcomes that we are trying to measure. Several studies have been done in this area, but if you have a teacher of your same race, it's been shown to impact many things like how students are graded, attendance, suspension, science, math, reading, and writing scores, and also college enrollment. Here's one quick example of a recent study in one of those areas that looked at how teachers grade across race, and it included over 1,500 students and was conducted right before the pandemic in 2019, that illustrates the importance of teacher diversity. The two papers here are identical, except for the names in the sentence, with the assumptions that the participating teachers would assume that Deshaun was the name of a Black boy and Connor was the name of a white boy. The teachers were told that they were part of a grading study, and they were randomly assigned one of the papers and asked to assess if it at least met the standards. They found that white teachers were significantly more likely to grade the paper belonging to a Black student as not passing compared to the paper assumed to belong to a white student, even though the papers are identical. More specifically, they found an 8% difference, and that was even higher in schools where no race is a majority, where they found a 13% difference in whether or not they thought the paper was passing. And this is just one example of why having a teacher of one's own same race partially determines student outcomes. And finally, I'll share one last metric, and that's around teacher qualifications. According to the Learning Policy Institute, who conducted a study recently in California looking at school districts where students of color and white students are consistently achieving at higher than predicted levels, they found that teacher qualifications were the most important school-related predictor of student achievement. And they emphasized in that report years of teaching experience as the most critical qualification, which is what we'll focus on today. So that the data that I'm going to share with you is comparing local classes where 2/3 or more of the children are of color to local classes where 2/3 of or more of the students are white. Research suggests again that having a teacher with more than 2 years of experience is especially important for student success, what researchers call novice teachers. And in Monterey County, 31% of classes with a high percentage of students of color are being taught by a novice teacher, compared to only 9% for classes with a high percentage of white students. And let me just add here that I don't believe this is an issue with the teachers themselves. I think it's highlighting a systemic need to create environments that are more supportive of teacher tenure. And in consideration of the previous metric about teacher diversity in our community, I think it's showing us that supporting teachers of color in their earliest years of teaching would have a dramatic impact on the success of local students. And one further note about that is that the solutions to the high-level metrics that I'm sharing today reside with those who are most impacted, and the solutions won't be effective without working directly with the students and the teachers themselves to help to develop those solutions. So let me wrap up here and say we know that until people see factual, recent, and local information that reveals disparity gaps, we're often relegated to debating different points of view. So an early step in the work to end systemic inequities within and between local organizations and systems is to continue to make the invisible visible, and to do so in rigorous and objective ways that are informed by data and high quality research. We can come together as a community and move beyond opinion, complicated jargon, and the unfair systems that we inherited. Measuring systems takes us from the things that may seem hard to understand, perhaps to some people like they only apply in other states or cities, or that they passed a long time ago, and turns it into something that is local, that is ours to change to support all children and youth in meeting their full potential. And so let's come together. Let's identify, measure, and address our local systemic inequities and work together to build a more thriving community for all. So thank you for listening. And I believe we have some time now for a couple of questions.
Excellent. Oh, Michael, I'm so glad you were able to join us and share that data. I mean, it is quite disturbing and eye-opening, but I think really important that we identify to have more conversations to inform where we go from here. So that would be just one of my first questions. The people that are here with us today that might be leaders of organizations or involved somehow in the education process, you know, can you maybe offer up a few ways that people can get engaged who are really interested in closing these systemic racial disparities, but they don't really know where to start? What would you recommend?
Sure, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of the easier places to start is probably within somebody's own organization. And so you might start out with an outcome, like I mentioned today was third grade reading. So you might be interested in something like the diversity of your leadership, or how fast people advance within your organization. So identify where you have an equity gap. And then I think talk to the people about the equity gaps, see what the systemic issues are. You know, it might be in the hiring processes, or there might be some aspects of belongingness or something like that. But I think the employees have the solutions. They'll tell you what needs to be done in order to make this work. So identify where you have equity gaps, and I think talk to people. I think that's, you know, some of the way that we're able to see some of these insights ourselves.
Right. Just opening up that space to have those conversations and listening to your people, I think, is a really good first step.
Absolutely.
Well, I wish we had more time. We are really at time now, but I do have, yeah, I think we're gonna have to wrap up, because if I get in that question, we're gonna be talking for another 5 minutes. So
sure.
I just want to say this is so interesting. To me, it's just the beginning of a really important and deep community conversation that we need to keep going with. And I look forward to, you know, following the progress of the data and learning more about how we're implementing change to have those numbers look different the next time we see them. So thank you again for all your excellent work in this area. And if I didn't mention it earlier, the work that they're doing here, and Michael in particular, is getting national attention. And we're just really, again, lucky to have so many fabulous, smart people in our region. And Michael is certainly right up there, one of my favorite people. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for having me today.
Okay. Okay, excellent. We are rolling right along. And okay, this I'm so excited about. I know we talked a little bit about housing with Assemblymember Rivas and with our other electeds that were on, but I came across this, I don't know, about 6 months ago and learned about Boxable. And I thought this is something we have to have and share with our region, because it's so freaking cool. So I reached out to them, and they say they'd be happy to be part of it. So I'm really so excited that Galliano Tiramini is here with us today. He's one of the founders of Boxable, and he graciously agreed to be here with us. But I think in order for you guys to get your brain wrapped around what he's going to be talking about, we should start with this video, which, you know, the old adage that a picture's worth 1,000 words. This is amazing. So we're going to run this video, and then we'll get Galliano on the stage. Great. And with that, we're going to get Galliano on the stage. Welcome.
Hi there. How you doing?
Good, thanks. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm Paolo Tiramani, standing in for Galliano, who's my business partner. Thanks for coming and attending. So yeah, thanks for that introduction, Kate. Super nice. And I'll give you just a top line view of the Boxable project, and then go down and we can maybe take a walk around the factory and even look inside a casita with me as your host. So Boxable is a building technology that is basically post-industrial. Post-industrial means basically it's built in a factory. No other buildings are built in a factory that can ship, and because it's a very difficult problem. And one of the core technologies that we have with Boxable is that we pack down, as you saw. And we have basically two different types of space. We have the dollar dense space that cannot be compressed, kitchens and bathrooms, stairs, closets, and things of that nature. But about 2/3 of our home is typically empty space. So we just said, let's fold it down. And that allowed us to ship all around the world, 8.5 foot wide, with no flag cars, no permits, no nothing. Very, very easy. Yet when the product lands on site, in about an hour, Boxable unpacks to a huge 20-foot wide, 9.5 foot ceilings, and the larger units will have up to a 40-foot clear span. So you can imagine with those kind of numbers, Boxable, if you think of them as very large Lego blocks, and what you did as a kid putting those blocks together, you can build pretty much anything, especially with that ceiling height. And then in terms of the walls and interior construction, because we're in a factory and we have big equipment, we don't need little bits of wood and nails and hammers. We have large equipment, and we're a panelized process. Our thermal capacity is extraordinary. Wind load, shear loads, everything is superior to all current building codes. So Boxable is a building construction technology that can build almost anything. And we have our first factory one, which you can see behind me, very large vanishing point factory that we've set up here in fantastic Las Vegas, Nevada. So we're really not very far from you at all. And we're not registered as a charity. We are a for-profit business, but we are, having said that, we are good works. And the mission for the company has been set up to fix a problem, to fix one of the largest problems the world has currently. And the mission of the company is very, very simple: to put as many roofs over as many people's heads as we can at the very, very highest quality, but at the lowest price. So the factory you see behind me has been operating about 5 or 6 weeks. We've stood the whole factory up in about 7 months. It's really quite remarkable. We call it boxable time or boxable speed. And we're just in the middle now delivering an order for the federal government for 156 units for the Department of Defense. And our first configuration from the technology, if you think of the technology as basically 3 huge Lego bricks, 3 different sizes, and that can build almost anything. And then what do we do inside of those big empty boxes? Well, we configure them. So the first one we've configured as an ADU, which I see we were talking about earlier, which is an accessory dwelling unit, very popular in California, and that's $50,000 all in. That kitchen, appliances, and I'm going to take the time to show you. And I'm actually going to do a little walking tour, if I may. You can see around to our office space here. This is on the way. We'll go past the factory. You can see we are a design company, so everything has to be beautiful at Boxable. So it's an incredible designer space. I hope I'm not giving you vertigo. Very nice. Here's a packed up Boxable. And let's take a walk with me out to the factory. It might be a little noisy out here on Friday. On Fridays, we do lunches for the whole factory. And you can actually see the guys here with a bit of music playing and delicious food. And how about everybody give me a wave? There you go. So nice. So yeah. So Boxable products is pretty much everything resistant. It's waterproof, rated non-flammable. Bugs can't eat it. Mold can't grow in it. The homes are basically built from concrete and steel. So there's really nothing to go wrong. And you saw them being packed up, unpacked, and we can pack them up just as easily. So it's rather game changing in terms of what can be done with the product. Behind me, you see the lamination tables over here. We make them up to 40 foot long as a single panel. So you can imagine with a regular house, you need a very strong foundation or the house is just wobbly. But boxable product, because it ships in a truck from this giant factory, doesn't really need a foundation. So you can save a lot of money with the foundation. And what we found is with the first casita as an accessory dwelling unit, we found that people have their own use cases, and we've been absolutely stunned by the different use cases that we have for the product. We have over 100,000 orders, and the factory at full production should be able to make products. Thanks for bearing with walk. Here is the casita model here, and you can see in terms of plumbing and things like that, it all ports off to this corner over here. So let's take a walk inside. Let's see if there's anybody in here. Okay, thanks for bearing with me. We're in the casita now that you saw, and really a design for the ages. It comes complete with everything except the furniture. It comes with this huge refrigerator, and this would be the front door over here. And behind me we have, the living room, a full-size kitchen, big Z-Wave countertop, full-size bed. There's nothing small about boxable, and a really nice full-size bathroom. And comes complete. Unpack is about an hour. So that would be my 10-cent tour.
Oh, I love it. It's so fantastic. Thank you for that. We lost your internet connection a little bit wobbly when you were outside there, but I think you've got a strong connection there. So
sounds good.
It would be great if we could maybe have you field some questions from the audience in the time we have remaining. It's such an exciting, the possibilities are really kind of endless because of the modularity of being able to build, like you said, kind of Lego-like. And I think that video did a really good job of describing that. This casita could become a very large type of, apartment building or office space, in addition to, starting out as just a nice ADU, which, I want in my yard. Questions that are coming in are kind of the ones you would expect around seismic, fire, how are you guys making sure that you're making these earthquake proof and all that good stuff? You want to maybe just touch on a little bit about what's going into the production to alleviate those issues?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of hitting all the high points, we're bug resistant, water resistant, mold resistant, wind, hurricane rating resistant, and we're rated essentially non-flammable. These are concrete and steel. It's hard for them to burn. We do constant testing here, and with several testing labs apart from our own testing. We're going through a modular certification process state by state, so they will be available. Just starting now to write a boxable code. We find small because it's basically a pre-industrial situation. It's just a giant cottage industry, the marketplace, which is staggering considering how many homes we need. So we will be writing a boxable code at the federal level, and it will be a higher code and something that we think the public deserves for spending their money.
Right, and just so you know, we're breaking up just a tad on your video, but I think we're able to keep up. Questions about hooking up to sewer and like just the kind of nuts and bolts. If it landed in my yard tomorrow, Paulo, how would it actually? I wouldn't need to have a foundation down, but I would obviously have to have a sewer hookup, a water hookup, all that standard stuff, right?
Oh, there we go. Are we back?
We're back. Yeah,
I got the question. What happens if it lands in your yard tomorrow? First of all, if it lands in your backyard and you have a narrow backyard, Of course, we're 8.5 foot wide. So anywhere your car can go, this can go. And it unpacks just with some simple tools. You do not need a crane. You can move it around with a forklift truck. It'll unpack in a couple of hours. And then the hookups are whatever your local municipality needs as a minimum. I mentioned this earlier, I'm not sure if your viewers could hear it, but when you build a normal house, you need a strong foundation because guys with little sticks of wood and nails go around and hammer it together and it's all a bit loose and wobbly. And with the boxable product, of course, it's staggeringly strong. So we don't actually need anything to hold up the boxable. You can hold it up from the four corners. So we recommend whatever the minimum your local municipality will allow. And then again, because it's a consumer product, we make things very easy. Nothing comes out of the bottom of the building. Again, because why? That would be very difficult to access. All the waste, water, electric, all ports to just one corner actually behind me for your hookups. And depending on your use case, if you're putting it as an ADU, as a backyard casita, then you can hook into the main house power, the main house sewer, whether it's a well or city sewer. And it really depends on the use case in terms of what other infrastructure you need. And certainly you can absolutely enjoy completely off with the solar and the generator and things like that. It's no whatsoever.
Great. And you're kind of breaking up again. So it's all electric. I want to just clarify that point. Is that accurate?
So we are all electric, correct? And we have a mini split heating and cooling.
And does it come with an EV charger already built in and as part of that port outside?
We don't have any charger, but that's something no doubt is going to be a very popular option for sure.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, I know there's a gazillion questions, but what I really wanted to get to is something that I'm super excited about and talk to your co-founder about when we did our prep call is we want a factory here in our region. We want to be top of your list when you expand beyond Las Vegas. And can you just talk a little bit about what your plans are in that regard and tease us a little bit about what the possibilities might be? Uh-oh, looks like we lost him again here. Okay, we're gonna hope that he can come back. Maybe he's moving inside. Well, that's a bummer. I will tell you what I learned while we're waiting for him to come back on, is that, of course, this first factory is sort of a proof of concept, right? So they're working out the kinks, making sure that they can meet the demand that they have, especially from this very large federal government order. And then they'll begin taking and filling the orders that they already have, as you saw on the map, the hundreds of thousands of orders that they have from the folks, just like, people here on the call that are interested in buying one for $50,000. Not that $50,000 is cheap, but when you think about it in terms of a house that's completely ready to go with all the appliances even, it's quite extraordinary. I also was asking his colleague about installers. Was that another pipeline for jobs for us? Are they going to be certifying installers to do that? And there is a very, as you can imagine, a very robust plan behind that of sort of getting people lined up all over the country that are trained in setting these up and getting the qualifications and making sure that they can do that work. Oh, I see we have him back. Excellent. You're on mute though. So you're on mute, but we can see you.
Okay, let's do that. Sorry about the technical problems.
No worries. I've been just kind of riffing in the meantime.
So to answer your questions about the factory, we have the factory that you saw earlier on is 170,000 square foot. We could not start any smaller than that. It's 4 acres under a roof. It's an 1/8 of a mile long. So 3 football fields. That's 170,000. Our next factory in planning will either be in Texas or here in North Las Vegas. That will be 4 million square feet, 4 million square feet, which will be very interesting. And our plans for expansion will probably have 4 factories like that across the US. And then outside of our national borders, we will have franchise factory partners, major corporations. We're lining up now, foreign country, foreign market, foreign rules, foreign tastes. So we think it's best to partner. And so Boxable aims to be certainly the largest builder in the world. I think Factory 2, this is Factory 1 behind me, Factory 2 will make us the largest builder in the world. And thereafter, we think it could be one of the largest corporations in the world. And I know that sounds like terrible hubris for a company that's just started, but the fact is we're following the market, not leading the market in terms of ramping up production for consumer demand, especially beyond the casita, when the building system can make most things. And we're looking to bring to customers and homeowners what they expect from everything else in their life in a post-industrial world. When you order a shirt or a pair of eyeglasses or anything in your life, you expect to get it within a few days. You expect it to be high quality, perfect, and you expect to be able to return it, but not with building construction. We're going to change all that, and we have the technology and the staff to do that. And we're operating on what we call here boxable time, which is regular time multiplied by 5.
I love that. I'm going to use that. Well, what you're doing is quite revolutionary. We're so excited to bring this information to our audience. As I mentioned earlier, when I heard about it, I was just over the moon, and I wish you continued success as you continue to roll things out. And we look forward to hearing a lot more about Boxable in the coming years. So thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck.
Thank you, guys. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, well, that was pretty thrilling. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. It's really going to take a revolutionary change in how we approach building housing in order to get to the numbers that we need. Here, at least in our state and in our region, this could be a real game changer. So super exciting stuff. So I am going to pivot now and share something very special for the next few minutes. So I'm going to turn my camera off, and we're going to run a nice little video. MBEP mourns the sudden loss of board member Alfred Diaz-Infante, a dedicated community leader and affordable housing champion who served as president and chief executive officer of the nonprofit housing developer Chispa for more than 2 decades. Born and raised in Salinas, Alfred dedicated his life to building up his hometown. Through his work with Chispa, he not only helped develop more than 2,000 housing units in the region, but served as an outspoken advocate for affordable housing. Alfred joined MBEP's board in July of 2020, but he was an integral part of our work long before that, serving as a key member of the Housing Advisory Committee that helped MBEP formulate its housing initiative. His knowledge of the complexities of housing, his input, advice, his words of wisdom were central to shaping MBEP's work around housing. A humble and soft-spoken man, Alfred was an intent listener who could make people of all ages and experiences feel valued for their perspective. Someone who always had a kind word to share and who took a genuine interest in the people around him. Alfred approached the most challenging situations with kindness and optimism, and he generously shared the wealth of his knowledge and experience with others, serving as a mentor to so many and inspiring by example. Whether advocating for the Salinas Soccer Complex, leading digital divide projects in East Salinas, expanding healthcare access to the most vulnerable, or advancing countless affordable housing projects, he was right there doing what's right. Accolades bestowed upon him include being named a past Salinas Valley Chamber of Commerce Citizen of the Year and CSU Monterey Bay's Distinguished Fellow Award for Community and Public Service. He served on the Hartnell College Foundation Board for 10 years, then as its president from 2011 to 2015, earning an Outstanding Leadership Award from the foundation in 2018. In honor of his parents, Luis and Avilia Diaz-Infante, in 2017, he created the Diaz-Infante Family Scholarship for farm workers, children of farm workers, or low-income students pursuing careers in business, engineering, healthcare, communications, or education. Making the world a better place, one action at a time, was what truly mattered to Alfred. We are so saddened by his loss, but remain inspired by the huge legacy he left and that we can help carry forward. When Alfred spoke, people listened. I've always had such deep respect for his intelligence, his humility, and his authenticity. He was such a role model to so many of us who were lucky enough to know him. His quiet power and his ability to bridge between many different groups will always be an inspiration to me and others to do what we can to continue on in his memory. And now I'd like to invite to the stage our board chair, Dr. Eduardo Ochoa, president of CSU Monterey Bay.
Hello, I'm Eduardo Ochoa, president of CSU Monterey Bay and board chair of MBEP. As you just saw from that moving video, Alfred Diaz-Infante was a dedicated community leader and affordable housing champion who tragically lost his life recently in a car accident. Alfred served as president and chief executive officer of the nonprofit housing developer Chispa for more than 2 decades. He was also an MBEP board member. To honor Alfred's legacy and preserve his memory, I am pleased to share with you that the MBEP board has renamed our annual Community Impact Award to the Alfred Diaz-Infante Community Impact Award. We hope this is one small way we can acknowledge Alfred's significant community impact and quiet leadership that has inspired so many, that it will help people better understand the award's purpose and help keep his memory alive. Each year at the State of the Region, this award is given in recognition of an individual or organization who demonstrates significant community impact and leadership that inspires others. Our board of directors is proud to give this year's award to Willie Elliott McCrae, Executive Director and CEO of Second Harvest Food Bank in Watsonville, in recognition of his significant contributions to Santa Cruz County over the years. Most recently, Second Harvest's response to the pandemic included a hybrid food distribution program with mass distributions at the boardwalk and fairgrounds and partner agencies, and linking families with long-term nutrition homes and distribution programs. MBEP's Board of Directors is happy to recognize you as recipient for this year's award. Please accept this award in appreciation of your distinguished career and tremendous pandemic response efforts.
Eduardo, thank you so very much for this honor. And to the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, thank you so very much for this recognition. It has been such an honor to work for Second Harvest for the last 40 years, but never more so than last year during the pandemic. It was unbelievable the way the community responded, the way the volunteers and the staff responded. Virtually overnight, we were distributing twice as much food to twice as many families. We went from serving 50,000 people a month to over 100,000 people a month. From 600,000 pounds a month to over 1.2 million pounds a month. That was a lot of heavy lifting, and there were a lot of people that made it possible.
Congratulations, Willie, on this award. You absolutely deserve it. This last year, the food bank has really responded to the community's need, and that so much of that has been your vision and leadership, your warmth and passion, and I've been so proud to be a part of it.
Without you, we would not be able to provide the amount of food and services that we provide to the community of Santa Cruz County. Without you, this organization would not be where it is at today.
We've been able to see a growth of community members coming out to get our nutritious vegetables and fruits, along with other items that are necessities for their families, along with encouraging youth to be involved in our community food distributions. Some of them have been able to feed their own families as well, encouraging their neighbors to come by our food distributions and just increase the amount of the community we are able to serve.
Willie is so deserving of this award. He is the heart and soul of the food bank, and through his leadership, he has prioritized bringing together program participants, community leaders, donors, the business community, and staff to collaborate to end hunger in Santa Cruz County.
Second Harvest Food Bank could not have done it without you, without your leadership and without your guidance. This past year, you helped feed the community during this pandemic and during the fires. And I know that with your continued leadership, we will be able to help feed the community and meet our goal of 11 million pounds this year.
Congratulations, Willie. Well deserved. You have dedicated 40 years of your life to our community. Without you, we wouldn't have been able to do this.
Congratulations, Willie, on your Community Impact Award.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on your award.
Congratulations, Willie.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Good job, Willie. Congratulations.
Willie, Second Harvest Food Bank is clearly one of the premier organizations in our community that makes a huge impact. So it was obvious when we were deciding at MBEP on this award that you deserve it this year. I worked with you during the recession. I saw what you did during the fires, the pandemic. You innovated and brought food to people where they could get it safely down at the boardwalk in the parking lot. Thank you. You're my community hero.
I've been so blessed to be able to work with the most extraordinary group of staff and volunteers and trustees and partners for the last 4 decades, all working together to make sure that everyone has healthy food on their tables. And on behalf of all these folks, I accept this award.
Yay, Willie, we love you. We're so happy to honor you this year with this award. And of course, you all know how I feel about Alfred. So that was just lovely. And I'm so glad I have such an amazing board that believes in honoring these 2 very special men the way we did. So we have reached the end of our program. We're going to probably give you a few minutes back. I wanted to thank you so much for joining us today. A special shout out to our amazing speakers. I don't know, I think they're all the best after I finished one, but this one really felt really amazing and such quality speakers. So a special shout out to all of them. We do have a small token of our appreciation that I wanted to just do a quick show and tell of. We are sending all of our speakers, we always send them a little speaker gift. And this is a lovely package from El Pajaro CDC, Carmen Herrera's organization out of Watsonville. These are all amazing homemade entrepreneurs supported by that organization, a little gift pack. And I wanted to make sure to thank her for all the excellent work she does in our community, such a gem, and to want to support her this way by buying these for our speakers. And also just remind you all, as you're doing your holiday shopping, you might want to pick up a box. So be sure to check out El Pajaro CDC, their website. You can order and customize your order, and they have amazing products made right here in Watsonville by hardworking folks that are starting out their own food business. So do what you can to support them, please. And finally, I just wanted to thank everyone personally. This has just been an amazing part of my life these last 6 years in running MBEP, and all the support that you all have given me has just been so amazing. And, you know, as most of you know, I'm be sailing off into the retirement sunset at the end of this year. So next year I will be in the audience with all of you watching, and I can't wait for that, and continuing to support MBEP and the fabulous work that this team does. Our amazing staff, our amazing board, and the members that make it all happen. So it truly takes a village, and I'm just so grateful. So thank you all. Keep an eye out for the full event recap that we'll be posting next week. You can watch the recording and download all sorts of good stuff if you missed any part of it. And again, gratitude for everyone involved. Thanks to my amazing team, Maya et al, that put this, and Emmy, who stepped in to help us out today to produce the show. And I hope you all enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day.